at the end of time.
O'clock.
Hey, it's us again.
Yeah.
Don't you guys ever get sick of watching us like yapping about shit? That's amazing.
It's gonna be good. It's gonna be a good show today. This is gonna be about dragons.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk about where these ideas came from. You know, was it really dinosaurs? What spurred this shit on about dragons? It's not as simple as you think it is. All right.
I love
Yeah.
comparative mythology.
Right.
And I think the reason, because I think we got off on this on some, like, maybe on the sidetrack show or something like that, because I was talking about I've always been fascinated by dragons in particular because pretty much every culture around the world has dragon stories.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, so yeah, Murder Hornet came back and
Okay.
joined the channel, the membership thing
Okay.
that YouTube has,
Yep.
which is called Flashbulbs.
Yeah, it's called Flashback.
There's only one tier. It's called Flashbulb. It's kind of like a Patreon thing,
Right.
But it's not Patreon. It's YouTube, but it's the same kind of thing, membership. And you also get to vote on topics and stuff like that, just like the Patreon members
Yeah,
do.
this got voted on.
Yeah, so this was the thing that got voted on. And like I said, I think we were talking about before because I've always been fascinated by... Because, like, look, we were talking about this, and we were talking about this morning when we were kind of discussing the show. And I said, I feel like most cultures around the world also have, like, Sasquatchy kind of myths, too.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem quite as weird because that's just, like, a big hairy dude, right?
Yeah.
And that's just, like, a person, but big and furry.
Yeah.
Whereas dragons, that's something quite specific.
Yeah, a modern person would say, well, shit, they just talking about dinosaurs. And no.
Maybe not.
Yeah, and they're probably not talking about alligators either. So we're going to get down to it.
Yeah, but it's like really interesting, like the similarities and the differences.
Yeah.
I have my own theories about maybe where the stories came from, but
Yeah.
you
And
know.
is a Chinese dragon the same as a European dragon? We're going to get into that.
That's what I mean. It's like, yeah, they're different, which we'll
Yeah.
get into, but they have a lot of similarities too. Like I said, a dragon is something very specific, and I feel like
Right.
even though there are different iterations of it in different cultures around the world, that's still recognizably a dragon. Like,
Yeah.
you could show somebody like a Chinese dragon
Yeah.
that had never seen one, and they'd be like, oh, that's a dragon. It still
Yeah.
looks like a dragon.
Yeah, and the Aztecs had dragons.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that
Yeah.
too. Like, everybody does.
Yeah.
And that's crazy to me.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I mean, not crazy, but it's just like interesting. I think
Yeah,
that's
how'd this
interesting.
happen? Was this some kind of convergent evolution in the mind? Just something
Yeah.
that people would come up with? Was there widespread cultural exchange that we're not really aware of? Like, you know, maybe they traveled more than we think that they did. We're going to get down into that.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Well, I don't know if I want to necessarily spoil what my theory is.
No, we talk about it later. Don't spoil it.
But, well, yeah, what I kind of wanted to do, the way I had it set up, and you guys, when I started delving into this, I've been working on this for almost like 2 days straight, right? Like trying to winnow this down because dragon mythology is vast. Like I said, pretty much every culture around the world has stories about dragons, and so kind of paring it down to just like the real interesting shit or whatever, it's like, so I had to cut a lot of stuff out, you know what I mean? So just know that the stuff that I'm talking about, there's like millions more stories, you know what I mean? I just kind of stuck to some of the better known ones and then just stuff that I found personally interesting. And even then, this show might still be fucking 4 hours long. I'm not really
We'll
sure.
try to keep it.
We'll try to keep it, like, I don't want to get too far into the, because I'm gonna say that, and I'm just gonna apologize for this in advance, because we're talking about, you know, a lot of Chinese mythology. We're talking about Norse mythology, you know, Aztec mythology, stuff like
English.
that. I'm like, my pronunciation of shit is going to be not good. I'm just gonna tell you that right now, and because I'm looking at some of the names of some of the dragons, like from some, I'm just like, there is just no fucking way that I'm gonna know how to pronounce that.
Yeah.
I'll do my best, but you know, the more I drink, the less it's gonna, or the more I drink, the less I'm gonna care. So I might just like, you know what I mean? I might do better. Who knows? But yeah, so what I was kind of planning on doing is kind of going around the world, almost like chronologically, but not quite, kind of.
I thought you were going to say sexually.
Going around the world sexually?
Yeah, going around the world sexually.
Oh,
yeah,
you
that
wish.
was a term, you know. That's an old-fashioned term. Going around the world. Okay. All right.
Oh, when people say they're going around the world now, that means you're going to Epcot and you're drinking around the world.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
just
yeah.
going to all the pavilions and drinking booze at all the places.
Yeah.
Which my brother loves to do. That's one of his favorite things. But but yeah, because sex around the world. Have you done that, Tom?
No.
No.
Well,
Kinda.
probably I did, but I probably didn't think of it as what
You
they were
didn't
talking
think
about.
of it like that.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, you've been a lot of places.
Yeah.
So yeah. Tammy said, Jenny, your pronunciation is going to be a hell of a lot better than any of ours. Well, I don't know if I'd go that far. But like I said, I've seen some of the words, and I'm just like, oh, that's going to be a rough one. But we'll see how it goes. But yeah. So we wanted to kind of like go around the world, maybe chronologically, roughly in time. And then at the end, I kind of want to go into all the theories that people have about why all of these cultures have such similar stories, even though they supposedly didn't interact with one another, like when these stories came from. Because dragon stories are old, way old. You know what I mean? Like predating writing, predating all of that.
Yeah, it's strange that the Egyptians didn't have it, though.
They do.
They did?
They do have
Apep, they're going to say Apep was
Apep, and there were were a couple of other ones too.
So
like
I was
massive
thinking,
serpents.
I was thinking, would Apep be a dragon?
Yes.
So he is. Okay.
And there's a couple other ones too.
Okay. All right.
Like I have that in my notes
All right,
also.
so they did have a dragon.
Yeah, they did.
Then that would be kind of like the Midgard serpent.
That's
Apep.
we got that one too.
But Apep would be the Midgard serpent, wouldn't it? Kinda.
Sort of. Well, actually, the Egyptians, I can't remember what its name is, but it's in my notes. The Egyptians actually have one that's more like the Midgard serpent.
More like, the Midgard serpent.
Right.
Okay.
Interestingly, I stumbled across this documentary on YouTube today, which was actually kind of cool. It was. You remember when the Discovery Channel did that like mermaid mockumentary?
Oh yeah, but I got fooled by it.
I know. This was kind of like that, but it was much better, and it was about dragons. It was acting as though there was a paleontologist who, like, they found this cave where these, where a dragon essentially had been preserved, and, like, it went into them being like, this can't be a fucking dragon, and then, like, they came at it from, like, a scientific point of view, and then they had, reenactments of like the dragon like fighting a T-Rex and stuff like that. It was actually pretty cool. It was British, or like the guy that did the narration was British. But it was actually pretty fun, and I was just kind of like, this is actually kind of cool, and like it kind of taught you science at the same time. But obviously it was, it's pretending like dragons are real, but they were completely like serious about it. So I don't know. I can't remember what it's called, but I thought it was like kind of cool. But it was a good idea. Yeah, Leviathan too. Yeah, we're going to talk about that also. But yeah, Ben says not mythology, history. Yeah, and like I said, we'll get into it toward the end. But I mean, people could be. I don't think they're talking about a real animal, but they could be exaggerating a real animal or amalgamating several animals or something.
Right. Where did you get this idea?
Right.
That's where you get down to.
And like that's what's always like fascinated me about this, because it seems like it's one of the few. I don't know if that's true, because there's a lot of real common mythologies that kind of span cultures. You know what I mean?
Werewolves.
That too. Yeah. Like human transformations that aren't real.
That seems to be Roman.
So maybe it's not so much a case of somebody coming up with a story and then like, everybody kind of being like, oh, that's good, and doing their own version of it. But it's like maybe human brains just naturally go along these particular tracks, and one of them happens to be like a dragon thing. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Although the words that they use to describe early dragons doesn't mean dragon, not literally. A lot of times it means serpent. That's the thing we're talking about.
Yeah.
What the fuck are they talking about? Snakes.
Yeah.
Some shit's translates to worm, but
Yeah.
they mean wyvern or snake.
Yeah.
But they mean serpent.
Yeah, I mean,
Serpent.
that's literally where the word comes from, which I'm going to
Yeah.
get into in a second.
Right.
But, yeah. And we should note, too, that, and I think most people know this that know anything about dragons, but the Western conception of the dragon is different than the Eastern conception of the dragon, generally. Not always.
It's a different character.
But, and there are some Eastern stories that are closer to the Western ones, which kind of lends evidence to the theory that I'm kind of that I think is the case. But generally, in the Western tradition, dragons are usually seen as like monsters,
Yeah,
something to be defeated.
Like the devil.
Yeah.
It's
Whereas
mentioned in the Bible.
Yeah.
Serpents
but
and-
like I
and
said, it's
dragons.
much older than that.
Yeah, it's much older than that, but they're going back to Tiamat.
Yeah.
And fucking
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that too.
the cosmic dragon that Marduk slayed is what they're talking about back in fucking
That's Babylonian.
Babylon. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't Babylon.
Yeah, well, it was
Was it?
Babylonian. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That's the Babylonian
I thought it was
creation
Persian.
story.
I thought it was okay.
Persian,
They may have had
they
that
have
too.
their own
Version of it.
versions
Yeah.
of it, but it's like different. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
gonna get into that a little bit too.
Tiamat was the mother dragon that Marduk slayed, and from the body created the universe.
Yeah,
And in a way, if you ask me, I believe that the dragon in the book of Revelation is talking about uncreating creation. Throwing
Yeah.
the dragon into the fucking abyss is the same, might mean what they're probably talking about Tiamat.
yeah,
Alright? So they're talking about God destroys creation because
Yeah.
you don't need it anymore in the story.
yeah. Well, I would argue that the stories about Leviathan in the Old Testament are a direct ripoff, or retelling, or a reboot of the Tiamat story.
Yeah.
I would argue, because they're very similar. Well, much like the Noah's Ark flood
Yeah.
story is kind of a reboot of
Epic of
the
Gilgamesh.
Epic of Gilgamesh, which
Yeah,
was
which
much
is written a
older,
lot better.
which was much older.
Yeah, you go listen to some audiobooks of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Talking
We
about
read
the
it in school, and
talking about the flooding of the earth.
it's great.
How the gods flooded the earth because it sucked. You know what I mean? Y'all needed to be punished. Y'all making too much goddamn noise, and it's just so
I
much.
agree with
It's
that.
just so much better than the Old Testament story. The Old Testament is like hillbilly version of that story.
It is kind
The
of.
original's written a lot better.
It is kind of.
Talks about the agonies of the people just scrambling up to the rocks on the highest peaks to get away from the water, and the angels crying at what God has done, and fucking it's badass shit.
Yeah,
Please have mercy on them. Like, no, fuck them. They
Nah.
gotta go. Gotta go.
we're gonna drown all you bitches.
Yeah,
Not a single goddamn
making
one.
too much goddamn noise.
Right.
That's usually what happens.
Making too much.
Making too much noise. Fucking God puts an end to that shit. All right, doesn't matter what God it is.
Honestly, I can't blame him. I mean,
Yeah.
people are very, very noisy.
Yeah, well, they gave him fire. That's another one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
But,
why did we do that? That was a stupid
Prometheus
idea.
gave him fire, and fucking Zeus says, "Fuck it! Look what you did. Why'd you give him fire?" Now
There
they got
goes the neighborhood.
Now they got whole fucking cities. I'm gonna shut this shit down. Okay.
I don't like it. Not one bit.
Yeah.
Not one bit.
Yeah.
Those are like hilarious stories. Those are hilarious stories to me.
They make sense though if you're looking at it from their
They
point
do,
of view.
yeah.
They're trying to
They do,
explain
yeah.
where things came from.
Yeah. But like I said, so the Western conception of the dragon, like you see on Game of Thrones
He's
and all that
evil.
other kind of stuff, usually evil. They usually have wings and all that other
Yeah.
kind of stuff. Whereas the Eastern dragons, they generally don't have wings. Some of them do, but mostly they don't. They're much more snake-like. And they're usually not necessarily friendly, but they usually represent good luck or nobility or... they're good.
Yeah, and they're like intelligent. They're real good at art.
Yeah, like wisdom and stuff like that.
They do some artistry. They
Right.
They don't have wings, but they still fly.
Yeah.
Like the Chinese ones, he's always pictured inside a cloud, and they draw them in a different way, depending on how many talons they had, meant things, and I think there was more than one. I think they had an entire series of dragon characters.
Yeah, because if it had 5 talons,
Yeah.
only the emperor was allowed to wear dragons that had 5 talons.
Yeah.
And then I think that there was a 4-talon one that was like actually pretty cool, and then like the 3-talon one was kind of like, okay, that was like the commoner dragon, I guess. But weirdly, like the Japanese dragon like usually had 3 claws too, because they got a lot of their stuff from like from China as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're gonna talk all about that. All the Eastern dragon, Korean dragons, all that kind of stuff. Like I said, I found all kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, they still flew even though they didn't have wings. They just fucking levitated. They were so cool. They just. Look,
I have always loved like the Chinese dragon iconography. It's just it's so awesome.
And if you look at those, they look like serpents.
Yeah, they look much more like snakes than. But the thing about it is that the Western conception, like what we would recognize as a dragon today, that comes from the Middle Ages.
Yeah, it's not old.
Like, well, I mean, that's old, but it's not that old. Like, prior to the Middle Ages, dragons looked like lots of different things, and they were generally more snake-like. You know, they got, like, more beastie as time went on. You know what I mean? I think, like, the oldest, which I think we'll get into when we talk about kind of the Indo-European kind of stuff, I think the oldest painting that shows a quote-unquote modern-looking dragon is from, like, 1260. Prior to that, they kind of were all over the place. Like, some of them had wings, some of them not. Some of them were kind of snaky, some of them not. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it was just kind of... But the thing about it is that all dragons, no matter where they come from, which, again, like I said, is very specific, seem to be an amalgamation of lots of different animals. It usually has kind of like a snake or reptilian base, but then it usually has a head kind of like a horse or a lion or something like that. And then sometimes it has feet that are like bird feet, like eagle feet. You know what I mean? So it seems to be like a combination animal, which is something that is common across all cultures, or at least seems to be. So I found that very interesting as well. So as you mentioned, the English word dragon actually didn't enter the language until the first part of the 13th century. And it came from Old French. And the Old French word, which is also dragon, that came from Latin, Draco, which is, you know, the name of the constellation, obviously. And the word Draco means just big-ass serpent, big snake. And in turn, the Latin came from the ancient Greek drakon, which also means serpent. Now, I should note that the Latin and Greek versions of the word, they didn't mean like a mythological creature. They just meant big-ass snake, pretty much. So anything that looked like a big serpent was a dragon, essentially. It didn't mean it was like a mythological thing like we would recognize. Interestingly, I found this very interesting. A lot of scholars and linguists think that the word drakon, the ancient Greek word, might have come from the Greek word derkomai, which means I see. And they think that this might be because snakes and reptiles and stuff like that don't blink. So they thought it was just like always looking at you.
Right, yeah.
And so like maybe that's why the word derived from that. I'm not sure if that's the case, but a lot of linguists do seem to think that, which I thought was like really interesting. And they kind of associate that word with something that has like a deadly gaze. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's watching.
So yeah, so it's like always watching.
Can't
like I said,
escape its gaze.
yeah, because like snakes, like I said, they don't have eyelids, so they can't blink. So I thought that was like really interesting. I don't.
They
know
don't
if
need
that's...
eyelids though. They got a clear.
Yeah,
it's clear scale over them.
Yeah, they have an eyelid technically, but it's just clear. You can't see it. So it looks like they're just like looking at you all the time, but they're not actually. Well, I mean, I guess they could be. But yeah.
I think they can shut it down.
Yeah, they probably just like space out.
Space out. When they're dreaming, you know.
And like not. I used to have for a pet, I used to have a gecko, a tokay gecko. And they have big ass yellow eyes like that, and they don't have any lids or anything over it, so they have to constantly lick their eyeballs.
Like a wiper blade.
You like a wiper blade, yeah, like to keep it. It's like it's pretty freaky, like watching him. It was like kind of neat though. Like he's constantly like licking his eyeballs. But yeah, so as I mentioned, probably the oldest written stuff about dragons comes from like the Near East, like ancient Mesopotamia. And another thing that again seems very specific, and some of these appear in Eastern mythologies too, is that there's lots and lots and lots of stories of a hero, specifically like a storm god or a thunder god, fighting a dragon. Like, that's very, very common. Like, I'm pretty sure that, like, every Western culture has a story like that. And some Eastern cultures, like, have a couple of stories like that, too. So, like, again, that seems like a very specific story. Like, a storm god fighting a dragon. But that's very, very common. And we'll talk about some of those, like, later on.
Yeah, it's weird because Yahweh is a storm god.
Yeah, exactly.
After he floods the earth, the rainbow in the story, what they're talking about is that's Yahweh's war bow, because he carried a bow. And in the depictions, so his bow was promised that he wouldn't do it again, type of deal.
Yeah.
It's funny how there's serpents involved in that story too. His wife was a serpent,
Yeah.
Asherah. She got demoted in the New Testament to just a serpent in the garden. But that's not what she was. She was a goddess that had serpents. That's what it started as. It's kind of a hermaphroditic symbol.
Yeah.
Somehow it's phallic, but it goes into earth and makes an egg, and it comes out of an egg, a male thing that comes out of an egg, and it goes back into the ground, makes another egg, and they're neither male nor female. They didn't realize that snakes had gender.
Right.
They didn't think, though.
Well, it's just kind of like, too, how snakes get associated with immortality because of the way they shed their skins.
Yeah.
So I think that people kind of associated those two.
Maybe
so
they
I
live
think
forever, yeah.
Right. So I think that's why they became a symbol for that.
Yeah.
And like you said, like there's a lot of goddesses that
have snakes
or can turn into snakes. There's a lot of shape shifting. I didn't realize that there was like some shape shifting involved in like dragon mythology too.
I don't think they realized that they laid eggs, and they didn't realize that they had sex.
Yeah,
they just thought
they do.
There was a phallic shaped thing that went into the ground and became an egg, and then it would come back out and make babies. It would become a babies. A whole bunch of little babies. Weird. They thought they were reproducing asexually.
I guess.
Yeah.
Which some animals do, but snakes are not among those animals.
No, they can every now and then.
Yeah. It depends on the species.
Yeah.
But
they didn't know about that though.
Right. Yeah.
They were just looking at it and go, man, this animal didn't have any junk on it. It didn't have a dick or anything. He's smooth, man. This thing can't have sex.
Yeah. What's going on with that? Poor snake.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So yeah, they didn't really seem to realize that like some animals that have internal penises.
They didn't know that stuff could unfold.
They could like pop out.
Yeah.
When necessary.
Yeah. They didn't realize that there were holes there. They just couldn't see it.
I guess no one was weird enough to look that close.
Yeah. I don't think they questioned things.
I guess not.
So don't touch it. Don't look for its junk. What you doing?
What are you doing, you weirdo?
Sick ass motherfucker. It's obvious that there's nothing there. I think that's just how they work. Yeah.
He's like looking at his cloaca or whatever.
Gotta be in here somewhere.
I know he's got one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
You're crazy. He's gonna bite you.
Holy shit. But yeah. So, ancient Mesopotamia, Sumeria, kind of the Babylonian cultures, they have like a bunch of different dragon type stories. For example, there are some poems in Sumerian, and they usually, and in this case, dragons are kind of like a good thing, because usually there's like kings, if they're really revered, then they're usually compared to these big like dragon-like monsters, which are called Usumgal or something like that. So like I said, that seems to be more of like an Eastern thing, which is kind of interesting. There's also there's kind of something like a dragon in the sense that it's kind of an amalgamation of animals that turns up in a lot of Mesopotamian artwork from like 2300 to 2100 BCE, somewhere around there. It's kind of like, its front part is kind of like a lion, but then its back part is kind of like a bird, and it has wings on it. So it's kind of griffinish.
It's a griffin.
Kind of. Yeah. Which in some cases are kind of considered dragon-like, because it's the same kind of thing, because dragons are also parts of other animals, you know what I mean? This one, they said the artwork is, they found like a lot of artwork that has this particular creature on it, and it almost always has its mouth open, and they think that it might have been known as roaring weather beast, like not, what is it called? Not Iru? Something like that. But they think that that might have been what that signified, because dragons throughout pretty much all cultures mythology, dragons are generally associated with weather of some kind. Rain, storms, thunder, something like that. And a lot of them live in the sea. I think it's not so prevalent in Western cultures, although, some of the stories have that. But in Eastern cultures, for real, they're like all come from the ocean or the sea, or they live in lakes.
A sea serpent
and stuff
is a
like, sea
dragon.
Yeah. It's a similar kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like a lot of Mesopotamian artwork has these kind of dragon-like creatures that are kind of like lionish, like lion bird kind of hybrid things that sort of look like dragons. You know what I mean? Or some of them have scorpion tails too.
Which is funny to me. Chinese dragons look like cats. Their faces look like
they
cats.
do, and like a lot of people have said that too.
Yeah.
Well, and like some Western dragons have faces that kind of look like cats as well.
Yeah.
And there's a theory about why that might be, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So now, as we mentioned before, there was another one too. So another one that is also Mesopotamian. This one, probably the best known one from this time period, is called, and I'm sure I'm going to pronounce this wrong, because I looked up how to pronounce it, but I don't remember what it said. It's Muskusu, something like that. So, which means furious serpent. This is also, it kind of looks like a snake, like it has like a neck and like the body parts of like a snake, but then the front legs are lion legs, and then its back legs are bird legs, like eagle feet. You know what I mean? So this is basically used to represent various gods in the Mesopotamian pantheon, and is kind of worn for like protection. So it seems kind of positive in this sense. Now, as we mentioned before, there's also Tiamat. Now, Tiamat was a Babylonian goddess, and she was like the personification of chaos, or like the chaos before creation, like primeval chaos is what she represented.
Yeah, cosmic chaos dragon.
Yeah.
It was like the universe before creation.
Right. That's exactly what she represents. Yeah. And she's like
before
a massive...
the Big Bang. That's what they're talking
about. Right. Pretty much. Now, her story came about in the, Babylonian, very famous Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish. Now, she was slain by Marduk, as we mentioned before. Now, it seems that there's lots of different variations of this story. In most variations of the story, she does seem to be described as like a big-ass dragon, because they say she has a big tail and horns, and she has like a hide that you can't penetrate with weapons and all that kind of stuff. So she's like this big ass dragon. And in the best known version of the story, Marduk kills her and cuts her up, and then uses all her body parts to like make the world or the universe.
Reality, yeah.
Right, is like what they use. But there are some versions of it where she seems to be like a person, like a woman. But I think the most, I don't know. I think the best known like versions of the story have her like, they describe her like a big ass dragon.
Well, a dragon probably in that culture had a humanoid personality. It was a goddess. So
and there were different versions, like different cultures around that time period also had stories about dragons that could morph into people.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Well, like when we get into like talking about Meso-America, like Quetzalcoatl, he could morph into a person.
Yeah. So you're talking about deities, and that means superhuman intelligences from the point of view of the people that are writing them.
Yeah.
So they're supreme beings.
Yeah.
So it's like it could easily imitate a human.
They could turn into a person if they want to.
Right.
I'm just saying. So, as I mentioned before, in the Old Testament, in the book of Psalms, actually, they talk about the Leviathan, which is basically like a big fucking sea monster, right?
Yeah.
And Leviathan gets killed by Yahweh, which in the Old Testament is, God of Israel and Judah. And that's kind of part of the creation of the world, also him slaying this big fucking sea monster. Which, like I said, I kind of feel like the whole Marduk and Tiamat thing is where that story comes from, because it sounds like a very similar narrative.
Yeah, Leviathan is probably a serpent.
Yeah.
Sea serpent.
Yeah, it's like a big sea monster.
Some people say, well, they're talking about a whale. Probably not. Probably a sea serpent.
Possible, but every depiction of it that I've seen looks like a big sea serpent.
Yeah, makes sense.
And in Job, it actually says that it breathes fire and smoke. So it's like a dragon. It's basically a dragon. And also, they kind of make it pretty clear in the Old Testament, too, that Leviathan also not only is just like a big sea monster, but he also represents nations that are against Yahweh.
It's probably based on Tiamat.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Because Tiamat was kind of like the early Mesopotamian version of the devil.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably why in the Judaic religions, the stuff that came from God of Abraham, dragons have a demonic tone to them whenever they're talked about.
Yeah.
So that's probably what it is. They're talking about Tiamat.
Mm-hmm. And that comes right from the biblical stories, because the biblical stories tended to take older quote-unquote pagan stories and whatever was going on in there said, well, it's clearly evil. And it just made everything into like
people that wrote
stuff.
the Old Testament considered the stories of the great floods and the stuff in the Epic of Gilgamesh to be history. That was real. They just recast the characters as their gods.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's just they rebooted it. Rebooted it as their gods, doing the parts of the older gods. A lot of times. They're just retelling their favorite stories. Because they're going, oh, remember that time when this happened? Remember that story? Oh, we got to put that in there.
Remember when we killed that dragon?
This is going to be, this time this is going to be, Ishmael. Okay, he's going to do it. So
it's just reboots.
They're just rebooting.
They're just rebooting. They're just taking like the old stories they liked. And like you said, and a lot of times, anything that was, I kind of feel like the stories maybe prior to the biblical stories were more morally ambiguous generally, whereas the biblical stories tried to make them more, they were trying to make it like, one God and this is the one you got to worship and shit like that. So it's like everything other than that, they're just going to make that bad.
Kinda.
I mean,
some of
generally,
the Old Testament stuff is so vague, you don't know what the fuck the moral lesson was.
That's true. That's true.
Because it's so old, it's not relevant anymore. So you don't know what the lesson was they were trying to tell you.
And it's just cobbled together, like I said, from various stories that were floating around during that time
But a
period.
lot of Roman stuff's like that, too. We have all kinds of Roman fables and stories and religious stories that they had for their gods. And you can plainly read the story, but you don't know what the story actually was trying to teach you.
Right.
Maybe
back then they knew.
Back then they knew, but
now we're just like, what?
Right, yeah.
The hell are you talking about?
They're trying to teach you some kind of a morality that was important to them.
Yeah.
But we don't even see it.
Yeah, because we don't have the context,
so far,
obviously. Yeah, Ben says in Dungeons and Dragons. Oh, and yeah, I remember this too. Tiamat is an archdevil and the deity of evil dragons. That's right. But she has lost command of her own layer of hell and now has responsibility for guarding the first layer from uninvited guests. That's right. I remember that from when I used to play D&D when I was much younger. Yeah. But yeah, I do remember that. I think she was even on the cover of one of the books. I thought that my brother had. It was a long time ago. DVD Dragon said Christians took stories from older pagan religions and used them again like reheated pizza. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, a lot of that. A lot of the stuff in the New Testament is Dionysus, stories that kind of came from Dionysus. Some of it came from cult of Mithra or Mithraism. It was a Persian religion.
One of these days we should do a show about Mithraism too, because that's fascinating also.
The whole idea of the Last Supper, that came from Mithras, and 12 disciples at the Last Supper. That's Mithraism.
Yeah.
And it's funny that
Norse mythology has a version of that too, actually.
And what's funny is that there's 12 disciples, but there's also 12 signs of the zodiac. And all that shit was tied in. They understood it in ways that we don't.
Yeah.
And a lot of it had to do with numerology. Because the Romans were big into numerology. And Christianity is a Roman religion. And it's been influenced by the religious competitors it had. One of the main one was cult of Mithras. And it absorbed cult of Mithras. It stole a lot of its fucking people, probably, a lot of its followers. So the stories kind of merged. So now you have stories with Jesus in them, but he's doing things that Mithras did. You know, even the same number of followers, because Mithraism was from Persia, and it was real big into the signs of the zodiac. It was kind of like Scientology, evidently. It's been totally wiped out from history, but some things survive about it. It seems to have been like Scientology, where you leveled up. You had to do certain things, and you would level up, and it had something to do with knowing your horoscope, knowing what sign you were born in, knowing what was Taurus inside Sagittarius on this month. How's that going to affect you? They were doing that, but it was a Christian-like religion at the same time. Christianity seems to have absorbed some of that early Christianity. It's in its stories only. They didn't have those practices though. Those were probably gone a couple hundred years later. But I would imagine early Christianity probably had a lot of damn astrology in it too.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Well, and like I said, I'm just fascinated by this. I love comparative mythology. That kind of shit like fascinates me.
Yeah.
So it's like I just love like where stories came from and all.
It definitely had numerology in it.
Oh yeah.
7, 7, 7, 7, 6, 6, 6, 6, 12, over and over and over again. 72 is over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Even Islam has 72 virgins.
Yeah.
So originally there were 72 sons of fucking. Well, that was actually Old Testament. 72 sons of El Shaddai, or God Almighty. One of them was Yahweh. He chose Israel. And the sons of God had sex with the daughters of men, creating the Nephilim. So in other words, they're talking about the same situation in the Greek pantheon. You had father of the gods, all his sons, and they're cracking all the fucking beautiful females, making demigods.
Yeah.
Like Perseus and shit. And Heracles. Well, Jesus was that. Jesus was a demigod.
Yeah.
A Roman demigod.
Same kind of thing.
His father was God, and the mother was Mary. The same as Hercules.
Was just a random ass lady.
Yeah. His dad was Zeus, and his mom was some hot chick. And I think Zeus fucked her in the form of a bull, didn't he?
He did indeed.
So he
was always changing. Like he was like,
why be
sometimes
a man when you're gonna knock it down?
Swan.
Become a bull, all 16 inches of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. Fucking,
he was a swan sometimes.
And a fucking shower of gold.
Shower of gold. I don't know how that works.
Shower of gold. Nowadays, that's like what you see in the porn flicks where they're throwing the dollar bills on the girl, like that when she's doing her act.
Okay.
Back in Roman days, it was a shower of gold.
I was imagining.
Give it up, baby. Give it up. Give it up.
I was imagining.
Twerk it.
Just like a shower of gold coins, like going, like shooting into someone's pussy.
No, that's what raining down. Make it rain.
Oh, okay.
Make it rain. It's as old. It's as old as time. You put that hoe out there and just make it rain on her. She'll give it up. That's what God did in the old Roman religion. So that's right. Twerk it.
He could just be a shower of gold. He didn't even do dick or nothing.
Yeah, just a bunch of money falling on her.
How'd the swan thing work out, I wonder?
Because it's just some elegant shit, you know what I mean? All pretty and shit. That's if he's going to get soft with him. He's going to, you know what I mean?
Although I think swans
nowadays he'd come at you like in the form of Prince. But back then, they just turned it in the form of a swan, you know?
Yes, you never know. You never know how he might turn up.
You never know. When he's manly, he's gonna come. When he's hyper masculine, he's gonna come at you with a bull, hard on and everything. Religious stories are awesome.
They are kind of,
because they're very telling on the people who wrote them and the cultures. You know
like
exactly
I said,
what they were like.
When I was growing up, I always thought like Greek myths were so fun.
Yeah.
I love that shit. Like all the people like turning into animals and doing all kind of stuff. This shit's crazy. This is awesome.
Well, the Greeks and the Romans basically was maximum security prison. That's like something you see in maximum security prison. You know, men having sex with other men because they were less masculine than you.
Right.
You know, and then they would do it with women too, and then animals and all kinds of weird shit, and then animal-human hybrids.
Yeah, that was very
shit.
big. Yeah, it was very
But
big.
they didn't really see any problem with it.
No, they were just like, whatever.
And if you got out of line, they just fucking killed you because they were higher ranked than you.
Right.
A lot of people don't realize that murder was legal in Rome. As long as you killed somebody who was lower ranked than you. So it was like the mafia. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you could even kill a citizen if you were a lord.
That
You just killed him.
Yeah.
What'd you kill him for? He was being an asshole. Oh, okay. All right.
Because I didn't like his fucking
And
face.
that was
that's
law
why.
enforcement back then. You had to fucking obey people that were higher station than you.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Everybody was a cop.
Yeah, I don't like that.
You had to fucking mind your fucking P's and Q's, evidently.
Yeah, but I mean, you could just be walking around like not just minding your own fucking beeswax, and somebody decide they don't like you for some reason.
Well, emperors were always fucking chiding the rich people for fucking abusing power. You know, it says you're not supposed to be mean to people. You're supposed to have high standards, and you know you're supposed to be noble and shit. They were having
They're
problems.
like, nah.
They were having problems litigating, or they were having problems passing laws having to do with morality. You can't really legalize morality or like litigate. What do you call it? It's hard to force people to be moral. You know, they did have certain basic rights. I think even slaves had certain rights, but not many. You had the power of life and death over slaves that you owned in your house.
Yeah, well, I think that's been true
Yeah.
throughout the entire history of slavery.
Yeah.
Up until the relatively modern
Romans
era.
were ruthless though. If anybody in the house was killed and a slave did it, all slaves were put to death. And that actually caused riots in the city. They were like, because but they were all. What you did is they held all the slaves hostage with each other. You know.
Yeah. When I was talking about all the Christianity like ripping off all the old quote unquote pagan stories, yeah, Tammy said just like now remaking movies, people can't come up with an original story. Yeah, it's always been like that.
Yeah.
They're just kind of like, hey, I like that story. I'm gonna retool that, but I'm gonna put my own kind of spin on it.
I don't think it was fraudulent though.
Well, no, they were just doing. I don't think they thought anything
was-
about it. There was no concept of like intellectual property or
No.
anything like that. It's just like you heard stories and it's like, you know.
I think the people that actually wrote those stories were pious believers of the religions
Sure.
that they believed the older stories had happened.
Yeah.
But those stories came from a religion that was older than the one that they were in. They wanted to tell that story, but they didn't want to propagate that older religion. So what they did is they reinterpreted the old story. This was a good story. It was from God. But the rest of it was wrong. So then you reboot that story with God in it.
Yeah,
Your version of God.
You change some names.
You just
around.
change some names and you say it's from God. God
Sure.
says it's cool.
God said it was cool.
Yeah.
He told me.
And I don't think it was pious deception. I think they were honest, or they were trying to be honest with it.
Well, they
were
probably
doing what
just
they
thought,
thought.
well, they kind of had the right idea,
Yeah.
but now we know better. Like, because our God's clearly the right one.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Right. That's exactly
Yeah.
what they were doing.
That's exactly what
They just
were
didn't
thinking.
know, but they didn't know what God was trying to tell them.
Right.
Yeah, that's what.
Xanada
And
said,
that's actually kind of happens in the Old Testament.
yeah.
The burning bush. When Moses sees the burning bush, he says, "I am." Basically, he says, "I am the God Almighty, and I am the one that that your forefather fucking Abraham worshipped before you, and I am your Lord. You know,
like,
I'm
dude, you're a
Yahweh.
bush.
I'm Yahweh,
Knock it
your
off.
Lord." Basically, that's what he says.
I'm not listening to a bush.
What he's saying is, he says, "Oh, by the way, your forefathers knew me as El Shaddai, but I'm actually Yahweh, and I'm also Baal." The original translation says, because Lord also translates as Baal. So if you read it in the original Greek, it's saying, "I'm El Shaddai. Abraham worshipped me. He was your forefather. But I'm actually Yahweh and Baal." So all the stories about Yahweh that you have and all the stories about Baal, that's me too. And I was El Shaddai all along. But you call me Yahweh.
He's taking the mask off.
Yeah.
Like at the end of Scooby-Doo.
So they did that even back in the old days.
Yeah. It's like, it's pretty hilarious, like when you think, because, you know, people aren't any different back then. Xanada said the real forgotten religion is Zoroastrianism.
Yeah.
I have a little bit about that because they do have like some Persian or Zoroastrian
Yeah,
like
that's what I was
dragon
thinking.
myths and
I
stuff.
thought
as
Marduk
well.
was in Zoroastrian.
No, it's Babylonian. It's older.
Which was the one that was in? Which was the one that had Marduk? That had Zoroastrianism. That was.
I've got it like farther down in my
Yeah,
notes.
okay. There's a dragon in that one too.
There is a dragon in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ben said in the New Testament, the Christians started equating dragons with Satan and with serpents. Yep. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, but it wasn't just them.
Yeah.
The Mesopotamians believed that because of Tiamat, so they just inherited that idea.
Ben
Tiamat,
said
the cosmic dragon.
they still find hidden temples to Mithras every now and then. Yeah, they do.
The Vatican and all those early churches in Europe, they're built on Mithraic temples. The churches seem to have merged. They were merged for a while, and then what's funny is that all the Mithraic stuff underneath the bottom of some of those Catholic churches in Rome still have all that Mithraic fucking sculpture. They didn't. The priests didn't tear it down. You think the Christian priests would have? They didn't.
Yeah.
They let it be there because they respected it. It was handed down to them. And it's probably because somebody in antiquity realized that the two churches had merged.
Yeah.
And one of the fucking friezes that is there is a fucking picture of the Last Supper. Mithras is there with a table of 12 disciples eating.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the same story we have, and that's not Jesus.
Yeah. Well,
There's a bit they got
everything came from something
Mithras
else.
crawling out of a hole in a rock, and then something happens to him, and then it has to do with the story.
Yeah, I
He
can't
came out
even
of a rock.
remember.
Somehow,
Yeah.
a cave.
Like I said, we should probably do a show about that one of these
Yeah.
days. I read a book about it a long time ago, but I don't remember.
He slays a bull.
Yeah. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
there's a lot of sculptures of him doing that.
Yeah.
That they come across every now and then.
And then the bull's being attacked. And it's got a scorpion stinging the bull in the balls, and there's a dog that's got it by its nose, and it's all,
It's a whole thing.
it's all astrological signs, Scorpio and Taurus.
Yeah. Yeah, astrology was kind of a big deal.
Astrology, yeah.
Ben said there was a trick involving prostitutes catching coins while handstanding in Roman brothels.
Yeah.
That's pretty good, actually.
It's like the ping pong ball trick, just in reverse.
But somebody just like throwing a coin, like how baggy would your pussy have to be to like have?
I don't know. I don't know. We
just
can
saying.
try it, Jim.
You-
We can try it. We'll get
You want
the
me to do a
camera-
handstand
get
and, like,
the
fucking-
handstand? I'll put the tripod up. That'll be the next video we make.
Trying to get a coin in there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw a quarter.
Yeah.
I don't think that's gonna work out too.
Got two new videos up on. Got two new videos up on ManyVids. Jen in the car and Jen on the park bench.
Yeah, I finally put those up.
They're up there, yeah.
I only put them on many vids though because you were in them, like your voice was in them.
Yeah, I can't put them up on.
So I can't put them up on Stream 8.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And it's funny, we're this intelligent and we still make porn. Look,
Intelligence and porn doesn't have anything
You
to do
don't
with
do
one
the shit
another.
for money. You do the shit for fun.
Yeah.
You just do the shit for
I was
fun.
having a
Yeah.
good time. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah. we're this intelligent and we still. That's hilarious. That's another T-shirt we need to make.
You do it for kicks, man. Do it for fucking street cred.
That's what I mean. We just do it for fun. We don't
Yeah.
I don't make a fuck ton of money on it. It's just we just do it because we want to.
Yeah.
Ben said most of the myth cycles are borrowed. Norse mythology is a retelling of Greek legends. Yep, that's true. And Arthurian legends are a retelling of Christ and the Apostles. Yep, that is absolutely true as well. Like I said, everybody just reboots. So I don't know why people piss and moan about it nowadays, because people have been doing that since humans have existed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Most religions have, like, I'm one of the people that kind of really interested in the origins of Islam. I'm gonna try to look. I have a fucking funny feeling that's not as historical as the account is. We know how religions are born. The closest thing we know of that sounds like the story of Muhammad would be Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
Joseph Smith from
Mormonism.
We know that happened because there's government records, and he did exist, and it's a crazy tale.
That was a real dude, but
yeah,
I mean,
and he was called the American Muhammad in his lifetime, and he approved of that title. He was copying Muhammad. Almost everything about him was a copy of Muhammad. even tablets and Angel Moroni giving him the tablets.
Yeah, where do you think he got all those
That's
ideas
where he got
from?
the idea.
It's not as weird as it seems.
Yeah.
It's just, it seems weird because it's filtered through an American, like a modern American lens.
Yeah.
So it seems weird because it's not like ancient, you know what I mean?
I'm skeptical.
But it's kind of the same story.
Skeptical of Islam. I don't think that's a story. I don't think that's how it happened, because Islam appears fully formed in Western history. There's no account of a new religion and a bunch of warriors taking Christian land and a new prophet. There's no mention of that in any Western history. There's just a mention of desert warriors. They believe in somebody called Muhammad, but that seems to be later, after it happened. Well, we don't know. I think it was the Christians. I think it was all Christians. I think Muhammad might have been a Christian. And then later, after he won these wars, if he was real, because it sounds like King Arthur too. But then after he won the wars, he then changed Islam, changed Christianity into Islam after the war, I think. Something like that.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, you know, we could get into that.
I think it was changed into, if I get in trouble, man, motherfuckers try to kill me.
I was going to try to kill you.
Yeah.
It's all right. Tammy says, smart people like sex also. That's true.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true.
They have the imagination, they come up with crazy shit.
Yeah, maybe we'll try that. Maybe, that's actually be a good idea to do videos based on weird Greek mythology. You know what I mean?
It takes too much money, too much effort.
You could do, like I said, the whole shower gold thing. That'd be fucking funny.
I'll just get that damn gun that shoots dollar bills out.
You
Just shoot dollar bills on you. Yeah.
Okay. That works.
Yeah.
All right. I might need another drink. But before we, I was going to say before you go, because we're going to get into Egyptian mythology now.
All right.
So do you want me to wait for you?
Yeah, just wait a second.
Okay. So
Answer
I'm going
some
to.
questions or something.
All right. So let me go back to see if there was. Dana said Rome sounds awesome. I mean, Rome sounds awesome if you had a bunch of money and power. Everyone else, probably not so much. You know? Like, you just walking down the street and you, like, look at somebody funny or do something they didn't like, and they're just like, hey, I don't even like you, so bam, and, like, they just get away with it. That's fucked up. Xander also said, I've studied a lot about Islam. All that old Middle East history is fascinating. It really is. I really need to get more into that. Like, Tom watches a lot of stuff about that. I've read a lot about the origins of Christianity, the origins of, like, lots of different religions, because, like I said, I like comparative mythology, so I'm really interested how all of those stories fit together. But I haven't looked into Islam, like, all that much. You know what I mean? Yeah. Let me see. Iris says, Muhammad has been taught to read. Also depends on interpretation on individuals, too, but he's buried in Medina, Saudi Arabia. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah. Doing a show on the Crusades would be good. Yeah, I had thought about doing a show about the Crusades. That might, like, be... that might be a gargantuan task, but...
There's so many of them.
That's what I mean. It's like we might have to, like, narrow it down.
What do you want to do? Want to do a show on the Children's Crusade? How ridiculous
that's what... Yeah. Because, yeah, you'd have to, like, pick one. So I kind of feel like... Yeah, because I've always been fascinated by the Children's Crusade, because what the fuck was that even all about? But, yeah, we should probably... Actually, maybe I should write that down, because I don't think that's on my list. I have a huge list, you guys. You don't even understand. Like, every time one of you mentions something, if I remember, I write it down, and then I will try to put it in the polls. But I don't think we've ever done one on... We'll do, like, the Children's Crusade, because, like I said, that's kind of the most fucked up one. And that was the one when I learned about it in school. I'm just like, you've got to be fucking kidding me right now. Let's see. Gonna do the Greek thing, do the bull thing then. Yeah, well, it could be a pretend bull. It doesn't have to be a real one, obviously, because that would be, like, that would be bad. Yeah, Erica said Catholic churches used to cover old temples that had pagan things with the church over top. Yeah, that's right, they did. Common theme, it was said to contain the pagan ideas of what was considered evil to Christians. Yeah, that's where, and as far as I can remember, that's where they found a lot of Mithraic stuff underneath like, later like Christian churches or Catholic churches or something like that. Like, because they would build it over. It's like, we're just going to pretend that's not there. You know what I mean? So they did that kind of crap. And let me see. Nightmares and Rainbow said, I saw a documentary that, I'm not sure what that word's supposed to be, but the Egyptian god Set was one of the gods that inspired the Christian god. Yeah, there were a lot. There was just a lot of stuff going around at that time. Like I said, it's just all... It's kind of like the Marvel Universe. It was kind of like the Marvel Universe.
Yeah.
That sounds glib, but that's what it's like. That's what humans come up with, like heroes that are larger than life and stuff like that. And it was the same shit that was going on back then. They just didn't have movies.
A good example is Superman. In Superman, he had a heavenly father. His name was Jor-El. El is the name of, El Shaddai. This is the Abrahamic God. He had a son.
Hi, Pokey.
Kal-El. That was Superman. Comes down from heaven.
Mm-hmm.
He's raised on earth to be a savior of mankind.
Mm-hmm.
All right. He's at a place called Metropolis. All right. He can do all these great things. He can even fly. Thousands of years from now, somebody would see that, might think that that'd be a religion.
Yeah.
And that maybe Metropolis was a real place. Yeah. Thinking that they must be talking about New York. Maybe New York at one time was called Metropolis. But it's not. It's totally made up out of somebody's head. It was a Jewish kid wrote that story. Somebody who ran from Germany during pre-Holocaust era. When the Nazis took over, his family skirted him away to America.
It's like, fuck this.
That's the same way Kal-El came here. You know what I mean? Krypton was being destroyed, and his family sends him to a new place, to America. So you could say, in a way, Superman existed. It was the boy that wrote that story.
Yeah.
It's kind of about him. But then you go, does that mean Superman was real? No. Superman could fly. He could shoot lasers out of his eyes. All right.
He could go back in time by going around the Earth
time.
a bunch of times.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, you
So
run into that same problem when you start talking about Jesus. And you say, well, these stories are just written around a preacher, some street preacher that got real famous. Nah, it's more likely they just made him up.
Or he's just, like I said, an amalgamation of a bunch of different...
Every one of those stories is Dionysus
myths,
or fucking...
Sure.
Some of the shit that he says sounds kind of like Socrates.
Everything that he did...
Yeah. Somebody else did.
Before that. So...
Yeah. There was no historical Jesus.
They just cobbled it together from, different stories that were going around at the time or that were older.
I'm convinced there's no historical Jesus.
No, I don't think there was
There's
either.
nobody there.
But yeah, and like I said, I'm not trying to be offensive or anything like that, but it's just kind of I don't think he was a real person. He was just an amalgamation of a bunch of other
say there are Roman records. No, they're not.
There
are no Roman
figures.
Records. There's no Roman records.
Like I said, every single thing he did, an older mythological figure did that too.
There's a reference in some copies of Josephus. It was obviously inserted later into the book of Josephus, the Antiquities of the
That's
Jews.
an interpolation.
It's an interpolation. They went back and wrote that in there because it's not in all editions.
They did that a lot back then.
And it's a damn advertisement for Christianity. Oh, and by the way, this time there was a man named Jesus, and he was Son of God, and he was there.
It was like a commercial they put in there.
Yeah, right. Well, hold on. We've covered, and this is in a history book? Fuck out of there, man. Church put that in there.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, nobody knew who Jesus was until 100 years after he supposedly lived. Nobody knew who that dude was.
Yeah, and 100 years is a long time.
Long time.
And especially back then.
Yeah.
Because they didn't really have a lot of records like we have now.
Yeah, the Christian churches, it was actually from the 2nd century, early 3rd century.
Yeah.
Long time after it happened.
That's all.
And there wasn't one Christianity. There was Christianities, many of them.
Well, yeah, they were all competing.
Yeah. And they were all hokey.
It didn't really get codified until much later.
Much later, like 400. Well, 350.
Somewhere around
that. 250, 350, around that. We're not sure. There are no real old Bibles. The oldest Bibles I think that they actually have is full, complete Bibles, I think are medieval. But you have scraps of them from the Roman times. But just like a piece of a page. That's it.
High Desert said you should check out Neoplatonism and how it influenced all the major religions. That might be another thing that we could look into, because that's probably pretty interesting as well. So, all right. So let's get back to the dragons. I mean, we're still talking about mythology, so we're not that far off topic. But I wanted to wait for you because you had said that Egyptian mythology didn't have dragon stories.
But then I remembered Apep.
But it does.
Apep.
Apep is kind of the main one.
Yeah.
So he was basically, which I mean, you could call him a dragon. He's like a big ass.
I always pictured him as
snake.
an alligator.
He's like a big snake or like a big crocodile
yeah.
type of creature.
He's in the underworld.
Yeah, he lives in the Duat, which is the underworld.
Yeah, the Duat wasn't really the underworld. It was the horizon. Underneath the horizon. So
yeah, the underworld.
The underworld. Yeah. The place where the sun goes under the ground at night.
Yeah.
That's what they're talking about.
And there's
hell underneath there.
Right. Like the older stories say that when the sun sets, that's Ra going into the underworld to fight Apep.
Yeah, and
he got to do that shit every day. He's got to go down there and fight a dragon.
And to bring sunlight to give relief to the damned.
Yeah.
Because he was merciful.
Yeah.
You were in hell, but he's going to bring you some sun.
Yeah.
Okay. Give you a little bit of relief.
Yeah, here you go. So I'm coming to visit. Hey,
and then he comes up on the other side of the Duat, comes up out of the ground with a whole heavenly procession of stars and lords and gods behind him. You know him as stars.
Because he's got to make a big fucking deal about everything.
He's got a whole fucking parade behind him. Of people up in the stars. Kings and gods. Yeah.
See, I love all those fucking stories about the description of like the sun and the stars and the moon and everything like going across the heavens. Like just the stories they came up with to explain that are like so awesome.
Yeah, God of Abraham religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, they all have the Egyptian universe model. You have a flat earth with four corners to it. It sits on pillars that holds the earth up. We don't know what the pillars are sitting on.
A turtle.
Sitting on a turtle. Then you got a damn fundament, which is a fucking dome ceiling on it. All right, with stars that are set in it, and I guess it moves. All right, and the sun goes down underneath the ground and it comes up the other side. That's the Egyptian model. Yeah.
And that's
the sun just goes underneath the table.
It goes.
And the earth is not
It goes underneath the table and fights a dragon.
And comes up the other side,
He fights a dragon all night.
Yeah.
And then I guess he defeats the dragon or knocks the dragon out or something. And then he's like, whew, I'm back. All right. So here I go across the sky again. It's like, oh shit, now I'm going to fight the dragon again. It's like every day.
That's why you have in the Bible, and even in the New Testament, they says, and the stars fall from the sky and they fall to the earth. So they're picturing a star like the size of a coin.
Right.
Real shiny, but it's up
Little did they know.
It's up in the fundament, the foundation of the sky. And the waters of the sky. This is very confusing to a modern person. The fundament was the fucking solid ceiling that the stars were fucking set into. But if you looked at the ocean, it was blue or green, and it went to the fucking horizon, and then went up over the earth. So you had the waters of the sky. That's why the sky was blue. And that's why it rained.
That makes total sense.
Rain fell from the fucking ceiling sometimes, but the water was up there. So that was... And then, you had the heavens of the nighttime sky. I don't know if the water was still up there at night. You'd probably have to consult some old sages from the times, but I guess it was, because it could rain at night. Now I'm kind of
curious, because at night, I was picturing it being like a light bright.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it was a piece of black paper that had like little light bulbs stuck into it. That's what I was picturing.
Well, in that one fucking book of Revelations where it says the stars fell from the fucking sky, I'm imagining fucking Romans and Christians and Jews running around picking all these stars up trying to sell them. How much is a fucking star worth? That'd be some hardcore jewelry.
It would, yeah.
Shiny as fuck. More shiny than any diamond. How much would a star weigh per ounce? How big are they? Are they the size of a fucking headlight of a car?
If a star really hit the Earth, we would be in big trouble.
Oh. A star can't hit the Earth.
I know.
The Earth is pulled into the star and vaporized before it ever gets to it.
Like I said.
Before it ever... They didn't realize how big they were.
That's what they, know, I mean, in their defense,
with some exceptions,
they look real little.
With some exceptions.
Yeah.
Educated Greeks and Romans knew that the Earth was a sphere. And that all that shit was far away. And that there were planets. it was a heliocentric Earth, though. They thought the Earth was in the center.
Yeah. Well, of
I
course
think
they
some
would.
people later on were saying no, it must be, but I don't think they really proved that until the medieval era.
Yeah.
And you could get yourself killed talking about it.
Oh yeah, big time.
Right. But I think, if I remember correctly, some Greeks thought the sun was at the center of the Earth.
They
At the
did.
center of
Some of them did know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you didn't want to tell that to
Well,
the
it's just
medieval
kind of
European.
like even when when
Someone's at the center of the
when we were in
solar
school,
system.
like, and they were saying even when Columbus did his voyages or whatever, like, oh, everybody thought the Earth was flat. No, they didn't. No, they didn't.
No.
That is a misconception.
Educated people all the way up.
Educated
until
people knew it was a
knew it was
sphere.
round. Educated people knew the diameter of the equator of the Earth, the diameter of the moon, how far away the moon was, what the diameter of the sun was, and how far away it was. They knew that too. They did it by tracking shadows and using geometry.
Yeah.
They knew how far away that was and how big that was.
I mean, they're like probably in a lot of ways they didn't have a lot of the technology, obviously, that we have nowadays. So it's like they had to figure that shit out on their own.
Did that shit by mathematics.
Yeah. So in
Paper
some ways
and
they were
pencil.
probably smarter
Yeah, they were fucking smarter.
because they didn't have anything to like
Yeah.
fucking lean on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And they had to figure out when the sun was overhead how the differences between the shadows between long distances. So you could take the angles of the shadows at long distances. You had to know the exact time. And then by mail, said, well, how big was that shadow over there when at noon? Okay, but this one over here was fucking 3 feet long. So then they could back azimuth.
Yeah.
How far away the sun was, the diameter of the Earth, and the diameter of
Yeah,
the
they
sun.
figured all that shit
Figured it all out.
out a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think we talked about that some when we did a show about flat earthers,
Yeah.
who I'm not convinced are like all of them are trolling, but I'm not really sure because some people are that stupid.
I think some of them are trolling.
Oh, I'm sure some of them are trolling, but some of them are just stupid.
Yeah.
I
They
think.
want to believe.
I guess. Like, what do they gain out of that, though? I'm not really sure, like, what you would gain by
Piety.
thinking the Earth was flat.
Faith.
I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, I know some shit that other people... I can, like, lord it over people because I think everyone else is stupid. I'm like, no, it's just you that's stupid. So, you know, good
I
job.
was talking about Hitler grabbing their mustache man grabbing the fucking spear of destiny. They
Yeah.
did get that. But the thing is it was a fake.
Well, yeah, and,
a
like,
fake,
well, the
yeah.
thing about it is that I think...
All the relics were fake.
Sure. And I think that there was, like, a perception that it's like, oh, well, they're looking for all these religious relics, so obviously it would behoove you to, like, come up with some fakes if you were able to do that, to
Dan's
sell it to
correcting
them.
me. It was firmament, not fundament.
Yeah, you keep saying fundament, and I'm like,
Fundament
that
is at
sounds
the
like
bottom.
you're talking
That's
about
at the
somebody's
bottom.
taint.
The firmament was at the top.
Every time you say that,
Yeah.
I'm just kind of
Firmament,
like,
that's right.
all I'm thinking of is, like, somebody's taint or
Man,
their
these are
butthole.
fucking religious terms, man. They don't mean anything.
I
There's no
guess not.
firmament. No foundation in the sky.
Like I said, it's not like a light bright up there with black paper with little bulbs stuck into it, which is what I always picture. You know what I mean? Yeah, It's Me, Jay said flat earthers just want to be contrary. Yeah, I think a lot of them do. But like I said, don't they have better things to do with their time? I guess not. But, you know, I don't know. We did a show about them, and I'm just kind of like, whatever. They don't piss me off as much as creationists, but it's kind of in the same boat. You know what I mean? We haven't done a show about evolution and creationists, but if you want to see me get real mad, we should do a show about that one of these days, because those people really piss me off. But yeah. So, what were we talking about? Okay, so we were talking about Apep, who, like I said, technically a dragon, right? Apep is generally described as being 8 people tall, like 8 men tall, which is pretty long, right? Also has a head made out of flint. So, there's that. There were, like, when there were earthquakes or thunderstorms or something like that, supposedly it was Apep roaring that caused that. And whenever there was a solar eclipse, that was when Apep decided to come out the underworld and attack Ra during the daytime.
Okay, yeah.
So that was when she's like, oh, I'm coming to get you, motherfucker. So yeah, that was that going
Yeah,
on.
the Aztecs had a beat, though. They could predict when they were going to happen. I think they knew what it was. They definitely could track the cycles of it.
Yeah.
They destroyed a lot of shit from the Mexican civilization. It wouldn't surprise me that if the priests actually knew that the Earth was spherical and that a shadow was being cast on the Earth.
Honestly, they probably
knew.
did figure that out.
Yeah, they wouldn't have told the people. That would have been top secret information. They probably figured that out, though. Yeah, because you could use it.
Yeah.
You could say, we're going to make the fucking sun disappear.
Yeah, because why wouldn't you?
Right.
If you knew it was going to happen and
watch.
nobody else did,
Yeah.
be like, bitch, I'm magic.
Yeah.
Watch what happens
Or it was
today.
probably something along, the sun's running out of energy. It's going to fucking go dark. Now we're going to bring it back.
Yeah.
After we kill all these people and throw all them hearts out of there, you watch. It'll come back. And then they do.
We're gonna
and
fix
it goes away and they're scared shitless and they start fucking cutting people's hearts out. And fucking then it comes back and says, see, it worked. And then they all the people believe in them. They said, give all the credit to your king. And that's exactly, you listen to him. That's what I would do. That's what they did.
Yeah, I can see you doing that.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, we figured
Well,
this
how
out,
are you going to
but-
control them, man? They're savages. They cut people's hearts out. You can't tell them the truth.
True.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
Yeah, the Aztecs were badasses, man. They were hostile, though. But they were very edgy. They lived well, though. Read Hernan Cortez's fucking testimonies. They said they were scared shitless of them. They were scared of them.
Yeah.
And they didn't destroy the Aztecs. They just fomented a damn rebellion from all the vassal states that the Aztecs had formed. You know, the Aztecs were badasses, man. They ruled that land with the iron fist.
Well, and I feel like the more shit goes on, it's like the more we realize how complex and enormous that civilization was.
Yeah.
And so much of it is lost.
Yeah.
Which is like, that's really shitty.
Yeah.
I mean,
It was
hopefully more of it is out there. Like that
It was more complicated and more sophisticated than feudal Japan. And feudal Japan was pretty fucking sophisticated. But it wasn't a bunch of warring states. It was an empire. And it had a vast library of, according to the Dominican friars that were there contacting the Vatican, they're saying, we shouldn't destroy all this shit. This is a fucking vast wealth of fucking literature knowledge. And they're being told, no, burn it. The only thing they saved was like the Dresden Codex and a couple of other things.
That just makes me so sad
Yeah.
whenever I hear about that.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's a whole fucking civilization
Yeah,
that
even-
we'll never know about that now.
Even the Catholics, priests that were there on site are saying, no, you shouldn't be throwing this away. No telling what they actually knew.
Yeah.
All their little secrets.
I mean,
because I think they kept a lot of secrets from the common people.
yeah, I mean, you know, that's...
I imagine their
really
science was probably pretty advanced.
Yeah.
They weren't in the Iron or Steel Age yet. But they didn't have that shit it wasn't in their culture. They didn't know about it.
Right. All right, so I told you that Apep, probably the best known dragon type creature from Egyptian mythology, but there were a couple of other ones too. Matter of fact, there was one that was kind of a good guy. He was a giant serpent, and his name was, let me see if I can pronounce this correctly, Nehebkau, something like that. And he was supposed to like guard the underworld and helps out Ra whenever Ra has to go fight Apep. So he was kind of like a good guy. And he was so big that the whole earth was supposed to like sit in his little snake coils there. So yeah, so he was like a big fucking snake. There was also another one called Denwen, who was a big giant snake. And he was like a snake, but his body was like fire, like made of fire. And supposedly he was messing around one day and like caused this big, huge blaze and almost killed all the other Egyptian gods. Whoopsie. And he got killed by Pharaoh. And that's how Pharaoh got the divine right to rule, by killing this big giant fire snake. You know what I mean? So yeah, so Egyptian mythology also has dragon stories about it. There's also the Ouroboros, which, you know, nowadays you know it's like a snake swallowing its own tail, but the early version of that, which is Egyptian, was called the many-faced, and it was a snake essentially with 5 heads, and it was supposed to go around Ra and like protect him. And there's actually an Ouroboros they found in like King Tut's tomb. Like that's the oldest one that they found so far. Later on, the Ouroboros got adopted by the Gnostic Christians, and later became like a alchemical symbol, like in the Middle Ages. At which point they made it look more like a dragon, or like what you would recognize as a dragon today. And here we are mentioning a little bit about Zoroastrianism. So this was from Persia, and this is a giant snake, or great snake, called Azidahaka. And this was a dragon, pretty much an evil dragon, like a demonic kind of figure. He had 3 heads. And so this was kind of like one of the main Zoroastrian dragons. There was also another kind of Persian story about an Iranian/Persian hero named Rostan, and he has to slay a dragon who is 80 meters long, which was also invisible, or could become invisible, I guess. And it was him and his horse, whose name was Raksh, and he was going to fight this dragon with him and his horse. So Rostan, even though he's supposed to go fight a dragon, he falls asleep. I guess we all gotta sleep sometimes. Maybe he has narcolepsy. I don't really know. So the dragon comes up to him, and the horse tries to wake him up, but can't. And so...
sleeping his ass off.
Right. It's just kind of... That's what I thought this was.
He didn't mention that 5th that he drank before he fell asleep.
Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I gotta fight that dragon, but...
Gotta catch some shots.
I'll do it later. I gotta rest.
Yeah.
But yeah, so finally, like, the horse tries to wake him up but can't. But then, like, finally, like, Rostan wakes up and is like, oh shit, he like hears the dragon. The horse bites the dragon, and then I guess is able to distract the dragon long enough for Rostan to like cut its head off. And this was actually, there was a Iranian Persian story that was, I guess, kind of like the Heracles type of story, where he had like all of these labors or things that he had to do. He had 7 labors, and this was one of them, where he had to go like slay this particular dragon. So I thought that was like kind of interesting too. So that's very similar to the kind of Greek stories.
Now we've gotten to a part in the show where I can say a lot of people would think that maybe dragons were based upon dinosaurs. I don't think so. I think they're totally a fictional religious icon that really came from way back in the day. Serpents. They're talking about serpents, big magic serpents. They evolved into what we would consider a dragon.
Yeah.
So they're talking about serpents. I don't think it had anything to do with dinosaurs.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into that a little bit later on,
Right,
but yeah, I'm not really sure I buy that.
Because there's a bunch of
explanation
other
either.
stories about ancient Greeks and finding dinosaur fossils, and their take on them had nothing to do with dragons. Because they didn't find, as far as we know, anything like a head of a Tyrannosaurus Rex or anything. Most of the fossils they found were things like giant sloths, stuff like that.
Which
Not
are still
quite a dinosaur.
kind of scary.
It's old, but and then their explanation was nothing close to what you would think a dragon would be. It's a griffin, that kind of stuff. It's an Amazon. That's other fucking explanations they had. So I don't think dragons have anything to do with dinosaurs, and I don't think they have anything to do with alligators.
Now, you did say earlier that, and I've heard this as well, and maybe there's something to this, but that the ancient Greek conception of, for example, a cyclops might have come from elephant skulls.
Yeah, I didn't say it on the show earlier. I said it during.
That's what I meant.
Show.
You said it earlier, like this morning, like when we were talking.
They found an old.
Because elephant skulls do kind of look like it's just like one big eye, because where the trunk comes out, you know what I mean?
Evidently, they found a big crypt that was made by the Greeks. And the Greeks, and it on the crypt, it was basically showing that was the burial of a hero or a cyclops or a giant or something. And they opened it up, and it was a damn elephant. And the way they had it laid out, it was like a human.
Right.
But the elephant skull there, it didn't have tusks, I don't think. But where the elephant trunk comes from, there's a big opening there. It looks like an eye socket.
It looks like a big eye socket, yeah.
And I think they thought that was an eye socket to Cyclops.
Like a big ass man with one eye.
Yeah.
One big
They
ass
had him
eye.
like he was a man laying in there. And it was a fossil of some kind of mammoth or something, I believe, or an elephant. And they buried him with full honors when they found him. And their explanation, he had died in some fight and he was a great warrior, you know.
With one big ass
That
eye.
is fucking Cyclops thing. And then it was probably a tourist attraction. Hey, come fucking pay the respects and fucking at the crypt of this fucking big old Cyclops.
I mean, they might have known that was an elephant
Some
or
people
mammoth
might
or
have known.
something, but they were just kind of like, hey, it's $5, like,
Yeah,
or
it
5
could have been.
drachma or whatever it is. Like, come here and see this big. Like,
Yeah.
it might have been, it might have been kind of like a Ripley's Believe It or Not kind of
Maybe.
situation.
It was evidently
Because
pretty...
they weren't dumb.
It was evidently pretty well made where they had it buried, the little sarcophagus that it was in. But they also seemed to think that it was a tourist attraction
Right.
or a religious shrine.
Yeah, I buy that.
All right. It could have been, the Greeks had natural scientists. It could have been they looked at it, and there may be a chance that they went, no, I think this is an elephant. I don't know if the Greeks knew about elephants, but their knowledge spread pretty wide. But there's also an equal chance that a Greek natural scientist would go, yeah, that's a cyclops. Yeah, that's it. Look at it. That's definitely a cyclops. Look at the
Holy
one all.
shit.
So you don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know.
Yeah, there's no way of knowing.
Yeah, there's no reports that I can remember. I looked into this a long time ago of them ever finding a skeleton of, say, like a T-Rex or fucking some kind of giant raptor from the fucking Jurassic period, and them going, I got a skull of a dragon. There's no, because that would have been in some king's fucking museum, and that would have been handed down for generations. That would have been a prized thing. Look what I killed. My ancestor killed that thing. It's a dragon.
Right.
That would have survived, because we still got Roman statues that survived. They just got handed down in rich families.
Yeah.
So
I'm not saying it's impossible because history is long. There have been billions of people that have lived. It's entirely possible that somebody came across like a fucking dinosaur skull or something and was like, holy shit, it's a dragon. Do I think that's where all of the dragon stories came from? No. And another thing too, like I said, I was going to get into this at the end, but it doesn't really matter. And a lot of paleontologists have pointed out, it's like, it's very, very unusual, not impossible, it has happened, but it's very unusual for a dinosaur skeleton to be found intact. Yeah. Usually, like, just laying out in the fucking... Like I said, it has happened, but it's very, very rare. I mean, fossilization is very rare anyway. So to find something that still looks like something that would suggest a dragon to somebody... would be not impossible, but unlikely.
it's mentioned in an ancient Greek book that their scientists found the place where there was a big apocalyptic battle between Amazons and Griffins from some tale that they believed in. And they said right where it was, they said they found their bones. And they said right where it was, the mountain and everything. And they went down there to go see what it was. And then a cliff face. And it was in a cliff face. They said it was in a cliff face. In a cliff face, you could see falling out of there a bunch of fossils. But it wasn't even fossils of dinosaurs. It was mammals. Shit like giant sloth.
Yeah.
Things that they wouldn't really recommend or recognize. And there was one of these damn animals. I don't remember what it was. It's something kind of like a rhinoceros. Cross between like a rhinoceros and a buffalo. And if you look at the side of its skull, it does look like a damn parrot beak, kind of.
Yeah.
And they were going, yeah, that's a... And they were looking at it, the body of a lion and head of an eagle. That's a fucking griffin. And then they would just find big femur bones of things and go, look at the size of that chick's fucking leg. You know what I mean? She's an Amazon,
It was a big giant woman.
I think it was actually gazelle. But they're not finding them whole.
Right.
They're finding... Like
yeah,
you said,
'cause that's
one bone at a time.
It's not impossible, but because they have found whole skeletons like in situ, but they don't usually. Like usually they're
it's
scattered
little pieces.
around, and you have to kind of dig for them. Planting Seed says my theory is T-Rex was a giant chicken. Technically,
It was a bird.
It was
kind of a bird, more bird-like than lizard.
It's more bird than lizard,
Yeah.
which I kind of feel like finally that's penetrated the mainstream at this point. I'm like, dinosaurs were technically birds.
I think
they were closer to birds than they were to reptiles.
I think a dragon was a serpent, and then as time goes, and it's mentioned in religions, and over time it becomes a sea serpent, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, just like it. And then it modernizes, and then it's got wings. And I can't really explain why they have them in China, but I can explain why the Egyptians have them. The Aztecs had it, but they had snakes and serpents.
Yeah.
Theirs is a flying feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl. There's evidently more than one of them, I think. I think it was a...
Yeah, I got a whole bunch.
There's a whole bunch of them.
I mean, Quetzalcoatl is the most famous one, but
Yeah, but
there's a
they
bunch of
had
other
ones.
serpentine,
things
dragon-like
in their mythology.
deities.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a whole list.
Yeah, they came from they were cosmic. They came from the fucking sun. So these are just like religious things.
Yeah. And, and are we saying, were they based on real animals? Probably. But, I mean, there's some imagination involved, too, obviously. I think they're, like, exaggerations or amalgamations of, like, stuff that they saw all the time. Like I said, I kind of feel like you don't necessarily have to... I mean, yeah, you have to base stuff on stuff that you know about, that you've seen, because obviously that's kind of your whole sphere of imagination. But you can come up with stuff.
Yeah.
People back then could just make stuff up. It didn't have to be based on something.
The ancient Egyptians knew what a Nile crocodile was. They were afraid of them. They honored them. They were a godlike being. All right? They protected the Nile and they'd eat your ass. They didn't call him a damn dragon. And they didn't have anything to do with Apep. They did have a demigod or a god that had an alligator head.
Yeah.
Sopep. I think it was Sopep. Sopek. That's what his name was.
Sobek.
That's right.
With a B.
Sobek.
I got a P.
All right.
Yeah, he had a big...
So they knew what an alligator was, and they don't see an alligator and call that a dragon or equate that to Apep. And Romans knew what a Nile crocodile was. They didn't call it a dragon, although I don't think Romans had the concept of a dragon. I'm trying to think. I can't recall anything like a dragon. And the Greeks didn't have anything like a dragon. That was more Near East, coming from tale of Marduk and Tiamat, cosmic space serpent dragon. The Romans and the Greeks may have had sea serpents, though. Trying to think. If I recall, Jenny would know from her research. She'll be here in a second. Trying to recall if there's any, if I remember any Roman or Greek mentions of a sea serpent. I don't think so. No, just things like sirens. What else? Whales. If I remember correctly, I think there might have been some references to whales. We'll see. Hey, Jen, were there any Roman references to sea serpents? Or Greek references to sea serpents or dragons or anything like that? I don't think the Romans and Greeks had anything like that.
Greeks have lots of dragons.
They had dragons?
Yeah. I'm going to get into that in a little bit.
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, the hydras.
Yeah, they got all kinds of dragons.
Yeah, that's right. I
got a whole section on that.
That's right.
We just haven't got to it yet.
I didn't realize that would be considered a dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They got lots of dragons.
Right.
Like I said, I got a whole section on that.
Okay, we're gonna get to it
later on.
We're gonna get to it. So that's right. I just was thinking of dragon in the Western sense of a dragon, or the medieval sense of a dragon.
Yeah, and like I said, the modern conception of a dragon, that's just from the Middle Ages.
Yeah, right.
It was like way old, like anything that was a big ass
snake-like thing
that had legs or wings or whatever. And like a lot of them, I think the older ones, like now, obviously, like dragons, people think of them like breathing fire and stuff, which some of them did back in the day. But I think prior to the Middle Ages, a lot of them actually spit poison.
Yeah.
That was a pretty common thing for them to do.
Yeah.
But
The
yeah.
Hydra would have been a dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and there was a lot of other
There
ones.
was other ones that I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of that, yeah.
Yeah, like I said, we'll get into that in a little bit. So let's talk about the Eastern dragons for a little while, because as far as I know, China in particular has one of the longest kind of oral traditions of dragons, but they have a slightly different conception of it than we do in the West, obviously. They actually call what we would call a dragon. They call it Loong, I guess. I'm not really sure if that's how you pronounce it correctly. And they're usually seen as a good thing. Usually it's good luck. And a lot of kind of deities from East Asia and demigods and things like that have they either ride on dragons or have dragons as, companions, like their buddies or whatever. And also, whoever the emperor of China was at the time, they were also associated with dragons, which was a really positive sign of their power and wisdom and everything like that. And so for a time, whoever was the emperor of China, he was the only person allowed to have dragons on his stuff, you know what I mean, on his clothes and everything. Now, they also have in the Chinese zodiac, there is a dragon on there, and that's the kind of highest or most sought after zodiac sign. So I was watching a documentary not too long ago, just before the show started, and she was saying that whenever it's the year of the dragon, there's always a whole bunch of there's more births than usual, because everybody tries to have their kids in the year of the dragon, because it's supposed to be super lucky. It's the best one, you know what I mean? Which I thought that was really funny. Now, there's also a lot of stories in China. Like I said, it's not so much, they don't have a lot of stories about defeating dragons, but they have a lot of stories about raising dragons, which I always thought was kind of interesting. One of the most famous ones, which came about during the Warring States period, there's a man named Dong Fu, and he just loves dragons and kind of has insight into their personalities or whatever, and he's able to tame them. So the emperor gives him a name that means dragon raiser, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of stories like that with people raising dragons rather than defeating them. Also, I thought this was kind of a cool story as well. So there's a story about a guy named Fu Si, and he's supposedly crossing this river, and he sees a Chinese dragon, what they call a horse dragon, because it kind of has a horse head, sort of. And it has all these dots on its face and on its back and on its side and everything like that, all this patterns of dots. And he thought this was so cool that when he goes home, he draws a picture of the dragon with all the dots on it, and then he used the dots later on to invent Chinese writing. So even the written Chinese language is attributed to a dragon, which, like I said, I thought was pretty cool.
Somebody's asking me, Daddy's asked me what weapon would I select to kill a dragon. I was selecting M47. M47 Dragon wire-guided missile, and I'm qualified to use it. It's an old missile from the fucking 70s, but that's what I would use. It would kill it.
You could kill a dragon with a missile.
Fucking right. You carry around. Yeah, it's a man-portable missile.
I would try to make friends with the dragon. Maybe he's cool. And
he asked me what I would use to kill the dragon.
okay.
I said I would.
Then I could fly around.
I would use one that I'm qualified to use.
And use
one
it to
that
fuck
I
up
know
my
all
enemies.
About it. I'd get an M47 Dragon wire-guided missile, put the day tracker on it, that'd fucking extend the bipods and fucking launch that bitch and fucking kill the dragon with it. Had a 5-pound fucking shape charge warhead on the end of it, about the size of a coffee can. It would kill a fucking dragon, yeah.
Hi, Pokey.
I think that shit blew like a 17 inch, it would go through 17 inches of solid steel. That warhead. So it'd kill a dragon.
Oracle's looking at, for imagination exaggerations, please see the stories of Prester John. Oh, yeah. I remember that story. I remember reading that when I was younger. Yeah, Prester John was a legendary Christian ruler of the East. Emphasis on legendary. Supposedly he had unicorns. Yeah. I remember reading about that in like one of those like weird stories books like when I was a kid. We should probably do, you know what? We should do a show about that because I always thought that was like a really interesting.
What's the show?
Prester John.
I don't know that.
Yeah. He's like a mythological like Christian figure. It's pretty interesting, actually.
I'd like to do some of the American mythology, like fucking Paul Bunyan and fucking.
Oh, we never did one like that, did
all
we?
kinds of
Oh
American
shit!
mythology.
That's another one that we should do.
Who was the
And
black dude? That
John Henry.
John Henry, is that the guy who fucking could beat the steam
Yeah.
the steam drill? That was the first African American superhero.
Yeah.
John Henry. I don't think it was based on anything real though.
Probably not.
No.
But
He
but
could
yeah,
he
because
could
the
beat
United States has their own like folklore.
We have our own little fucking
And we
mythology.
should do like and we learned about that in school, like Paul
Yeah.
Bunyan and John Henry and all that kind of stuff.
John Henry, that's right.
Yeah.
Learned about him in school.
We
back
did
in the
too.
day.
Yeah.
He was in a race against the damn steam drill.
Steam drill, yeah.
Who could fucking tunnel through the mountain to put the railroad in there?
Yeah.
And he was this big ass fucking alpha fucking black dude, and he beat that steam drill, but it killed him.
Yeah.
He died. He
But
completely.
he's like, I won, goddamn.
I won. He died of it. It was just a tale of fucking man against machine. Yeah.
Oracle said there's a children's book where Paul Bunyan and John Henry played a baseball game together. It's pretty cute. Yeah, I used to love all those, like, well, because,
Yeah.
like I said, we did a whole, like, when I was in elementary school, probably, we did, like, a whole little section of, like, all that American folklore.
Yeah. Johnny Appleseed.
Yeah, like, all that kind of stuff, and I always
Yeah.
thought that was, like, so interesting.
Yeah. I think he was a real guy, though, I think. Wasn't he?
He was sort of kind
real.
of based on a real
Yeah.
dude. I mean, but like I said, it's kind of legendary.
Yeah.
But I think he's sort of kind of
Yeah,
based
and then
on
you
a
got the darker side. We already talked about that. Fucking Jeremiah motherfucking Johnson.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Kill one motherfucker with another motherfucker. Did all kinds of shit. Yeah.
Or at least his leg, anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, he was at war with the Crow Indians for killing his fucking flathead wife, who was another Indian. It's a story of a mountain man, mountain man gone Indian. That's what they called it back in the day. That's when you became an Indian.
We did a show about him, didn't
We
we?
did a show about
Yeah,
him.
I thought we did. Liver
But
eating
no,
Johnson.
liver eating Johnson. He was a
as they
cannibal.
called him.
Yeah, he'd eat the livers out of the Crow Indian.
Just because you made him mad.
Yeah, he was the boogeyman for the Crow. They were scared of him. But by the time he got
was
old,
crazy.
by the time he got old, all the Crow had died off and fought him, and it was all the kids that grew up were scared of him.
Right.
He's like a boogeyman. They adopted him. They respected him.
And that was a real dude, but I think a
dude,
lot of the stories about it were
Yeah,
probably
they made up a lot
exaggerated.
of stories about it.
But that's, that
Yeah.
kind of happens when it's like,
Yeah.
he was a real person, but
Yeah.
a lot of the shit that they attribute to him probably didn't happen.
Yeah, he had a one-man war against the Crow Indian.
Yeah, he was mad. He was a
He
little
was
mad.
pissed off.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, so
They had a fucking Robert Redford movie called fucking Jeremiah Johnson.
yeah, that's a good movie.
It's a pretty good movie. Yeah,
It's a good movie,
pretty good
yeah.
movie. It's epic. The screenplay was written by fucking John Milius.
John Milius,
who
yeah.
did Conan, and John Milius also did Apocalypse Now, or I think he did he directed Apocalypse Now, didn't he?
No,
No, he just wrote the screenplay, I think, right?
maybe I'd have to look it up.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're right about that, but he definitely didn't direct it.
Francis Ford Coppola directed it, but I
Yeah.
think John Milius was involved in that.
Yeah. But yeah, so where was I? Okay, so dragons responsible for Chinese writing, or
Yeah.
at least so the story goes. Also, a lot of like heroes of Chinese mythology are said to be like demigods in the sense that their moms had sex with dragons, so they're like half dragon. And I think there's kind of a thing too where the Chinese said their ancestors were dragons. You know what I mean? So like I said, dragons are seen as a good thing. Also, there's a story from Southwest China that a heavenly dragon actually made the first humans by, like, a bunch of monkeys came into his cave and he breathed on them and it made them humans. And then they went out and propagated. You know what I mean? So I thought that was like kind of cool. So like I said, it's almost like they trace their ancestry back to dragons, which I think is like really interesting.
Danny said the fucking Leonard Lake was all about unicorns.
Was
Really?
it?
He said he dressed a goat up as a unicorn. I didn't know about that. Leonard
Oh, wait,
Lake,
we did a show about them a long time ago,
Leonard
but I don't
Lake,
remember that.
that's the guy with Charles Nying. The dudes that were doing it. Yeah, those fucking sickos.
I have to go back and like see if we mentioned that on our show or not, because that was a
I don't
long
remember
time
that.
ago. I don't remember that either.
I never heard of that
either. But yeah. So much like, I don't know, I kind of feel like this is pretty universal across Asia. But dragons are associated with rain and are supposed to have power over rain. So when it doesn't rain, that means that dragons are being lazy, which I thought was very funny.
Yeah, they're bored.
So, yeah. So it's like, so like villages, if there's a drought, like they'll have like a festival or like a ritual where they ask the dragons to make it rain because they're the ones that make it rain. You know what I mean? So like a lot of the gods are like rain gods, like the dragons are rain gods. And so there's like temples to them and shit like that, which is pretty cool. So similarly, there are also dragons in a lot of mythology, like Korea, and they're pretty similar to the Chinese ones. I think their beards are a little bit longer. But much like the Chinese ones, they also have numerology is kind of ties in with it as well. So just like in China, also in Korea, they have like 9 as like kind of a lucky number. So dragons have 81 scales on their backs, which is 9 times 9, right? And that's kind of supposed to represent yang, you know what I mean? And generally in Korea, just like in China, dragons are generally good guys. They're generally like benevolent. They're usually related to water, farming, stuff like that. They bring rain, which is generally a good thing because it grows your crops. And so dragons in Korea, just like in China, like live in lakes and seas and stuff like that. Like every time there's a big lake or something, it has like a dragon that lives in it that you kind of like revere or whatever.
You been able to find anything about where the origin of these stories came from in China and you know, like what are they talking about? Talking about flying serpents?
Well, a lot of, like I said,
serpents.
the ones they don't, generally in Asia, they're water related.
Okay.
So I don't know if they're talking about an actual animal, like a whale or an oarfish or an eel or something like that, or if it's just I don't really know. But it does seem like across Asia, dragons are almost universally connected to water and rain. Like anytime you have like a lake or a sea or anything like that, it's supposed to have like pretty much like a dragon that lives in it, and you can like ask it for things.
I guarantee you it's an eel.
It may be. That may be what they're talking about.
Because a lot of stuff like what was that Japanese thing? It was actually a salamander, what they were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
What was that thing called? Kappa.
A kappa.
A kappa, yeah, which was a mythological creature that killed children. And it really existed. It was
it's a real animal.
The Japanese giant salamander. It's the size of a man.
It's big.
Yeah.
I've seen pictures of it.
And it could bite a child and drown it. Pull it underneath the water and drown it. So it was a mythological creature that actually existed. But, you know, they also said they could talk and they could do things. They were mischievous.
Which that would be something.
But they're talking about a giant Japanese salamander. They're endangered now. Oh, and it's the size of a small man.
Yeah, they're pretty large.
Yeah, the big fucking head. Big shovel.
The first time I saw like a photo or like a video of one, it was alarming. I didn't actually know that salamanders that large existed.
Size of a mid-sized alligator.
Yeah, they're very big.
Yeah.
They're very big. I can see how that would like be pretty alarming if you didn't know what that was.
So maybe they're seeing a pretty
Popping
big
out
eels, and they're seeing their bigger ones down there when they can talk. They can cause the rain.
Sure.
Maybe they're talking about eels.
Yeah.
And they're seeing eels, and because that was common in their diet.
Yeah.
So they're imagining that there's an even bigger eel down there with powers.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like whatever the Eastern conception of a dragon was. It had to have something to do with like a sea creature because almost all of them are associated with water and bodies of water. All of bodies of water have like a dragon associated with it. But the dragons are good guys. They're not like evil.
Yeah. They're never shown with wings or anything, but
Not usually,
in the sky a lot of times. In the tapestries, they're in the sky with clouds behind them. They're flying.
Yeah,
So
they're usually
they're
very
magical.
snake-like.
Yeah.
A lot of them have legs, like 4 legs, but they don't have wings in the same way that the Western ones
Right, they
do.
have legs.
Yeah, they generally do have legs.
It might be a salamander.
Possibly.
Like another giant salamander that's extinct now. That
Yeah.
was in China.
Like I said, they might be talking about
Yeah.
an extinct animal, or they're just exaggerating an animal that they see all
That's
the
what
time.
I'm thinking. They're exaggerating an animal they used to see all the time. It was
Right.
probably something like a giant Japanese salamander, but they probably had them in China.
Yeah.
Big ass salamander the size of an alligator. That would be impressive.
Yeah.
You could, in your mind, go, there are bigger ones. You just don't see them. They're deeper and they fly. And then you just build on that legend.
Yeah.
Well, they taught us how to write. And what's weird is that if it is a salamander, they are. If you look at the giant Japanese salamander, there's something kind of man-like about it. The Japanese describe it as man-like. It has fingers and shit.
Yeah.
And in the Chinese dragon, the fingers are fucking paramount. It's holding orbs and spheres and how many.
Yeah. Pearl of wisdom
Yeah,
is
right.
a big
So-
thing. The dragons are always like holding the pearl of
Yeah.
wisdom. They do that in Korea too.
Our dragons are more like based on shit we see like lizards.
Yeah.
That's a medieval dragon. It's more like a lizard. Chinese and Oriental dragons might be based on kappa or salamander, giant salamanders. How much y'all bet?
Yeah, maybe. Or
That
like I
fits
said,
the
maybe
description.
maybe eels or like I said, could be. I don't know what the range of an oarfish is.
Yeah,
Have you ever seen an oarfish?
they're long. Yeah,
Because some of them get hella big.
yeah, that's sea creature though.
Yeah,
I think this is something they're seeing in fresh water
maybe
because they're
so.
farmers. And that kind of checks out that it would be a salamander. And in the Chinese depictions, it has a mane like a lion. Well,
Yeah,
some salamanders have gills,
yeah,
and
that
that
kind of
come
stick
exterior.
out.
It kind of looks like a mane.
Yeah,
So they may be exaggerating something that they're seeing,
yeah, it could be that.
or they're hearing about it. Farmers are talking about it, and then people in the city exaggerate it in their minds, and then they're writing dragon stories. These stories and these little tapestries and shit that they're making don't come from villages. They're in their cities. So they're not really living the same life as a country person who may be seeing these things. They just might be hearing about them.
And
They
then
might be 6 feet long,
but then the more you tell
The
it,
more you tell it, they're bigger.
and then as the generations
Yeah.
go on, they get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah. So you got a guy in the city talking about, oh yeah, they're fucking 30 feet long.
Sure.
And then like 100 years later, no, they're 100 feet long. That's
Yeah.
how big my dragon is. It's got a whole mane. It's got 5 figures on it, like a man, claws. I think they're talking about a salamander.
Yeah, maybe so.
I'd have to do some research and see if China had those salamanders. I know that they were doing things like growing rice.
Yeah.
There were bodies of water everywhere. And they come out of the water. Sounds like salamander.
And Erica said, I bet those sea creatures were a lot bigger back in the day as well. That's
probably
another
could,
thing.
yeah.
That's another thing.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that
We talked
before.
about that.
Like when we talked about like sea monsters and stuff like that, it's like I don't think those people were crazy or seeing things necessarily, but it could be that animals were bigger back then
Yeah.
because we didn't have like overfishing and all that kind of stuff.
There wasn't industrial fishing. that
Right.
was
So
killing-
animals could have been much larger.
yeah, they could have got a lot larger because they lived longer and there was more food, so they ate more and got bigger.
Yeah.
There was woodcuts, medieval woodcuts from Europe, showing the harvest of that year, and it would show a cow and a big pile of corn, and then next to the cow, a catfish the same size of the cow. And people thought, well, they're just trying to depict a catfish. No, fucking Jeremy Wade fucking proved that a catfish, if it's old enough, can be about as big as a
Well,
cow.
he's caught some
He's caught 'em
catfish
almost that big.
almost that big.
Yeah.
And that's, and I'm sure
Yeah.
they were much bigger back in the day.
Yeah, medievals didn't have fucking rod and reel. They caught everything through nets. And once a fish got too big for a net, you couldn't catch it, so it would just live for a long time. So that fish might be 100 years old or 150 years old, and it's got fucking big, And there was medieval accounts of guys being eaten by these lake monsters. That's probably what it is, catfish, because they could swallow a man.
Well, and every now and then they still kill people.
Yeah.
Like catfish do.
Yeah.
Because some of them are absolutely big enough to like drag somebody underwater.
Right. And they weren't catching cow-sized catfish with nets and rod and reel. They were catching it by draining the pond. Drain the pond. And
then you'd be sitting there going, hey!
Sitting there on fucking get him.
What happened in my house?
Yeah. That's probably how they were catching.
I was living in that, you motherfucker.
They would drain ponds and just fucking get every fish out of the damn pond.
Which seems like cheating.
They didn't care back then. They were medievals.
No, of course not.
Yeah, and then they'd let the pond fill back up.
Still cheating. Mm-hmm. They're like, we don't care. We just want to eat.
Yeah,
but yeah. I might need another drink on your way back.
Okay, here.
Almost empty. But yeah, so so a lot of the Asian dragon stories are like pretty similar. Another thing that there's a lot of stories about in Korea is stories about people going to the undersea kingdom of the Dragon King. That's like a pretty common trope in a lot of like myths in Korea. In like fashion, Japanese dragon myths, very, very similar. Dragons tend to look pretty similar. They usually have 3 claws rather than, Chinese. The Chinese legends seem to have like kind of a little bit of a hierarchy where they have like 3-clawed dragons, which are like, pretty cool. But then like the 4-clawed ones are like really cool. And then like the 5-clawed ones, ooh, that's like the emperor shit right there. So, but the Japanese ones tend to have 3 claws. But just like in China and Korea, in Japan, dragons almost universally associated with bodies of water, lakes and stuff, and also with rainfall. Also, they tend not to have wings and kind of look snake-like. There's kind of another thing too where they can be, if you wanted to get rid of them, you could actually exorcise them with metal, like a sword or something like that. But like I said, very, very similar otherwise. Now, India also has its own dragon kind of stories. One of the one of the oldest kind of written records or whatever, mythology, the Rig Veda, there is, and this is kind of interesting because this is very much like a Western dragon story, because you have Indra, who is a storm god, right? And he fights against a big giant serpent called Vrtra, which, like I said, that's a very Western thing, but that's from India. So it's basically, and the dragon in this story actually represents not rainfall, but the opposite, drought. So it's almost kind of like an inversion. It's weird because it's like a Western story, but it's like an inversion of the Asian story too. Because usually dragons are good because they bring rain, but this one is like, no, I bring drought, like it's opposite. So we have to have, it's almost like an in-between kind of story, which I thought was kind of interesting. But Indra, the storm god, does actually kill the dragon using his thunderbolt. So when he kills the dragon, then it can rain, you know what I mean? So I thought that was kind of interesting because that's like an inversion. Vietnam also has dragon stories. And again, very similar to other Asian ones where it's like a positive thing. It's usually associated with like deities and royalty and things of that nature. And is usually seen as like, having to do with like, creation, you know what I mean? So it's a positive, connotation, whereas it's usually negative in Western, mythology. So, as I mentioned earlier, and as I was just mentioning when we were talking about the Indian story, you have, particularly in the Indo-European tradition, you have tons and tons and tons of stories of heroes, demigods, storm gods, thunder gods, fighting dragons or giant serpents. There's tons and tons of those stories in the Indo-European tradition. In almost every version of these stories, the dragon has a bunch of heads. That's very, common, or has a bunch of other things, like a bunch of tails or something like that. And in almost every story, as in the Asian stories, the dragons are usually associated with water in some way, like it came out of the sea, or it's associated with a lake or something like that. So you were talking about ancient Greece before, so let's kind of talk about ancient Greece a little bit, because they have a lot of dragon stories. So the first mention of a dragon, what we would recognize as a dragon, in ancient Greece is from the Iliad. And the first mention of that word is when they say that Agamemnon has a blue dragon on his sword thing, like his belt that has a sword in it, and also has like a breastplate with a 3-headed dragon on it.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Agamemnon had dragons on his fucking
Yeah,
equipment.
and that's like the first written, and like I said, a lot of these came from like oral tradition, I guess.
What did
this is
dragon
the first...
mean to the Greeks?
Like I said, it meant
described
serpent. It meant serpent.
Serpent.
The word dragon or drakon in Greek just means
Would have meant serpent.
huge serpent.
They're talking about the
is
serpent.
basically what it means.
They're talking about the serpent in the constellations. Because some of their like Draco.
Yeah, that's the Latin word, and
Right.
it means the same thing, serpent.
Right.
So there was a Greek poem called the Theogony, I guess is how you pronounce it, which was written by Hesiod in the 7th century BCE. And in that poem, Zeus fights a monster named Typhon, who has 100 heads. It's like a dragon with 100 snake heads. And the heads breathe fire. So it's very early, like dragon.
Typhon, okay.
Yeah, Typhon.
So it's like Hydra, but the heads don't multiply.
Right. Yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit
Okay.
too.
All right.
But so basically Zeus, so he fights Typhon, and he uses his thunderbolts, and he like he burns all the heads, and then takes Typhon and throws him into Tartarus, as I guess you gotta pronounce it. It's like the Greek version of hell, basically.
So it's a multi-headed snake.
Yeah, it's basically,
Giant
and in
multi-headed
some
snake.
versions it has wings too.
Okay,
so very
shit.
very
Shit,
dragon-like.
there you get European on us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I-
but pre that, like this is
Yeah,
very old.
this is real old.
This is ancient Greek shit.
It could be that the medievals got that from reading Greek mythology.
I'm sure they probably
because they
did.
read that. They had
Yeah.
access to it.
Yeah, because that
Real
came
educated
along.
people did.
Right, that came along much later.
So it might be that, hey, the wyvern is a worm, which means serpent, and it has
Yeah.
wings, and that's how they drew it. So
Yeah.
they probably got that from Greek mythology.
Yeah.
Typhon.
It's like it doesn't have wings in all the versions, but in
Right.
some versions it does. But it breathes fire for sure, and it has like a whole bunch of heads, and it's basically
There it is.
it's like it has a bunch of snake heads.
There
is
it is.
basically what it is. There's also a story about Apollo, who fights a dragon or like a giant serpent named Python,
okay.
who's been kind of fucking shit up around Delphi.
Yeah, you got to sometimes.
Yeah, and so he kills the dragon with poison arrows. So
Okay.
that's another story as
Just
well.
described as a big snake,
Yeah, pretty much like a big giant snake.
which that's where that's where it got its name, Python.
Yeah.
You saw a big snake, called it Python.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which, like I said, see, this shit's
Very
fascinating.
fitting.
It's
Very
fascinating.
fitting. Look at that thing. What kind of snake we call that? We call it Python.
Yeah, it's a
Fucking
python.
right.
That's where they
Right
got the
out
name
of the
from.
old stories.
Right out of the old stories from Greece.
Yeah.
Also, as Tom mentioned earlier, Heracles, or Hercules, if you prefer.
Yeah, the Greek Jesus.
Yeah.
Greek
As
Jesus,
the
yeah.
second
Yeah.
of his 12 labors, he has to kill the Hydra, which is essentially a dragon. I mean, it's a big snake that has a whole bunch of heads.
Yeah,
right?
every time you cut a head off, it grows two back. And
it grows
stump.
two back. Yeah.
So he had to figure out how to do that. The heads will multiply.
Yeah. Which, that's.
They
that's...
upped that. They upped Typhon. They were like, it's like Typhon, but worse.
But worse.
Every time you
It
destroy
doesn't have
a head,
100 heads, but every time you cut one off,
It
it
becomes
grows
two.
two back. So it's like you're just working against yourself.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do, Hercules?
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Hydra lived in a swamp, obviously, in Lerna. Now the name Hydra actually means water snake. That's what it means in Greek. Now there's different versions of the Hydra story. They can't really decide like what weapon that Heracles used to kill it. But by the time the story had kind of evolved, they're like, well, what he probably did was that he cut the heads off and then cauterized them,
burned it with a
so they wouldn't grow back.
Yeah.
However, here's another little snag. One of Hydra's heads was immortal. So that one you couldn't do.
Never really get.
So he had this cracks me up. So he had to cut that one off, and then he like buried it and put like a big ass rock on top of it. Yeah. And I said, so what happens to the next person that comes along and lifts that rock up? They're gonna get a real good big surprise, aren't they?
Well, what they did is these are like movies of the day. They set it up for a sequel. Yeah, somebody comes along and be like, hey, what's this? Oh shit! They might have to bring Hydra back, kind of like bringing back the Terminator or something. You might have to bring Hydra.
Yeah, see, they were thinking ahead.
Because it sounds like Hydra is a fucking reboot of fucking what was the other one? Typhon.
With 100 heads.
Yeah, they just fucking rebooted it and made it better. Yeah. There's a sequel.
It's like he doesn't have as many heads, but they just grow back if you cut them.
It's kind of like the first Terminator and then the liquid metal Terminator.
Right.
That's what they did.
That's right. That's a very They knew what they were doing.
They knew what they were doing even back then.
Hydra 2.0.
They had fans geeking out over this shit and trying to figure out what was fucking,
what was canon.
What's canon and what is fucking fan fiction.
No. There were nerds back then too.
No. That's Disney. That's Disney. That's not Star Wars. They're doing that kind of shit.
Yeah, because people are no different.
Yeah, they called them.
They just had different media.
They said different. Do it. They were doing the same thing.
They're arguing about the fucking stories.
That's right.
Just like people argue about shit nowadays.
Oh yeah, fucking and the Egyptians had Catwoman, sexy Catwoman. That was fucking Bastet, cat goddess. That's Catwoman, literally. So nothing's really new.
Yeah.
We are rebooting it. All those Marvel heroes and shit. That's Star Wars. Even that's
everybody
there's a lot
gets
of Indian stories that are kind of like Star Wars.
Everybody gets ideas from other places. That's just kind of how. And like I said, human brains are all like essentially pretty similar, and all kind of travel in the same channels. So it's just kind of like, so you're gonna get similar shit. Like even if you didn't. Yeah. Even if you didn't directly rip another story off, there's only so many possibilities that your brain can come up with.
There are ancient Indian stories about heroes and flying machines in the sky that can throw lightning and fire and shit. It's Flash Gordon. Yeah. That's what they're talking about.
Well, yeah.
Basically.
It's Proto-Flash
Gordon. Proto-Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
Which, that's where Star Wars came from.
Yeah. Well, okay, so, and Heracles not only had to kill the fucking Hydra for his second labor, but for his 11th labor, he had to fight another fucking dragon because, if you remember, he had to go get a golden apple from that tree in the Garden of the Hesperides. And that garden was guarded by yet another dragon, like a big-ass fucking snake, called Ladon, that never slept. Like I said, its eyes were always open, like I mentioned earlier. Now, Ladon, in some versions of the story, he has like a whole bunch of heads, and in some he just has like one head. You know what I mean? So he's technically a dragon. Now, in earlier versions of the story, Ladon is actually immortal, but later versions of the story, specifically ones written by Euripides and Sophocles, say that that Heracles killed him. And then later on, later again, they said, oh, Heracles like clubbed him to death. You know what I mean? And also there's another later version that said that he actually took the blood of the Hydra and dipped his arrows in it and killed Ladon with that.
Yeah, I remember that story.
Yeah. So that was yet another. So Heracles had to fight like a whole bunch of dragons. Like there's that.
Heracles knew his shit, man. He was the original hero, or fucking he was a badass hero.
He was, yeah.
And they made shit. Even Cecil B. DeMille made some good movies based on that. From Clash of the Titans, even though that was Perseus, but there was that same kind of stuff. There were a bunch of Hercules movies. I love Clash of the Titans. Yeah.
I never get sick of that movie.
There were Hercules movies too. They weren't kind of good as fucking Clash of the Titans.
Well, there's a bunch of Hercules movies. The Italians made a bunch of them, like their U.S. one stuff, but like there was a bunch of them on MST, so I saw a bunch of them, and some of them were kind of terrible. But
I liked the Sinbad movies. And
like Hercules versus the Moon Men. I could have done without that one.
Yeah, stupid. I liked fucking the fucking Sinbad movies.
I did like those too.
And I liked the fucking Clash of the Titans. That was the original. The
Yeah.
old one. That was pretty good.
I love
He was
Clash of the
able to
Titans.
unleash the Kraken on that one, man. Unleash the Kraken.
I saw that
Fun.
Clash of the Titans that came out in '81,
Yeah.
and it was on HBO or Cinemax like every 2 hours.
Oh, yeah, watch
it
it
seemed
over and
like
over
it was
again.
just every time it was on, I watched it.
Yeah.
So I've seen it like 4 million
Watching
times.
Percy's fighting that fucking two-headed fucking Cerberus. Remember that dog?
Cerberus, yeah.
Cerberus, and then
He had 3 heads. He has
three heads. That's right. And then it had the
The Medusa, and that was
Medusa,
I think
yeah.
that was Ray Harryhausen's last
Harryhausen,
movie.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
love the Medusa in that. I love
The mechanical owl that was there to
Bubo.
Yeah, Bubo. He was there to fucking compete with R2D2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had to put that kind of shit in there, but you know what I mean. I didn't mind it.
It was okay.
And they had the big ass scorpions and
Oh,
like,
yeah.
but actually one of the like Medusa is the coolest in that, but my favorite I think other than Medusa was Calabas.
Yeah, that final boss fight with Calabas. That was good. Yeah.
He was super cool.
Yeah.
Like, and he kept making like Andromeda come there and like solve all
Yeah.
his riddles.
Yeah.
And shit like that. I loved that.
Everybody was good looking in the movie.
Yeah.
A lot of hotties and shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that fucking movie.
Yeah.
I could watch it again right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing it again.
I actually wouldn't mind. But
Yeah.
I think we reviewed it not too long ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that fucking movie. So yeah, other than Heracles or Hercules, if you prefer, also had Jason of and the Argonauts fame. He also fought a dragon
Another good movie.
because he had to go get the golden fleece, right?
Yeah.
Now, the golden fleece was like hanging on that
Tree. Yeah.
and the tree was guarded by a big ass serpent.
Okay.
And this serpent is described as being in breadth and length a 50-oared ship. So
Okay.
a big
Size of a
fucking,
ship.
it's like a dragon.
Yeah.
So it's a dragon.
It's a dragon.
So there's a bunch of different versions of this story as well. In one version of the story, Jason kills the dragon and just is like doink and like takes the golden fleece and takes off with Medea, right? Now there's also another version where he didn't even wake up the dragon. He just kind of was like doink bye and like took off
Yeah.
like without waking it up and like without killing it, which seems a little cowardly, but okay.
It dawns on me now that in Milius's version of Conan, when Conan jumps down to the Temple of Set to go get remember the eye with the eye of the serpent,
Uh-huh.
he fights that giant anaconda.
Yeah.
He's basically killing a dragon.
Yeah.
He's slaying a dragon to get
See,
the
you
eyes.
see, it all makes
So it
sense.
all
now.
makes sense
It all
now.
makes sense now.
Yeah, it makes sense now. The Greeks would have called that a Draco.
Like I said, this is
Yeah.
a very, very common.
Yeah.
There are so many. I had to take out so many stories, you guys.
Yeah.
Like I went through. It's like I was just like, there's too many. I just have to like fucking, because there's a million, and a lot of them are like really similar. But so yeah, so Jason in some versions he kills the snake, which okay, badass. But in some versions he's like, you know what? I'm just gonna. And he just like he just like takes it. You know what I mean? Just shh. I'm not gonna wake him up. I'm just gonna take it. So he does that. Also in some versions, Medea, and this happened in Euripides' play Medea too, which is awesome if you haven't read it. I read it in school and it's really, really good. She said that she killed the dragon, like by poisoning it. Or like knocked it out so Jason could steal the shit. She's like, yeah, that was all me. You know what I mean? So there's that version too. Which I actually kind of like that version. Also, since we're talking about ancient Greece, let's talk about the founding myth of Thebes. Now, this is a wild fucking story. This is a wild story. So, there's this dude named Cadmus, and he's a prince, a Phoenician prince. And Apollo tells him, but this is how Apollo do, I guess. So he's like, okay, you follow this heifer, this cow, and wherever it lays down, you found a city there. Which, okay, all right, Apollo, whatever. So they did what he said. Apollo's a god, okay? So you got to do whatever he says. So Cadmus gets all his dudes, his men or whatever, and they follow the heifer. So the heifer lays down, and Cadmus is like, okay, I didn't know this was part of the deal, but they're like, okay, well, all of you guys go find a spring because I have to sacrifice this heifer now to Athena because apparently that's a thing that you have to do. So the guys are like, okay, chief, we're going to go find the spring. Because you have to sacrifice by a spring. That's the rules. So the dudes all go off, and they find a spring so he can do the sacrifice. However, the spring was guarded by a dragon, which apparently the god Ares had put there because that was his special spring, I guess. And he was just kind of like, I don't want anybody fucking with my spring. I'm going to put this big-ass dragon here to make sure nobody fucks with it. I don't want anybody swimming in it. It's mine. So that's what happened. So all the dudes go over there and it's like, well, we found a spring, but there's a fucking dragon there. And the dragon ate them. All the dudes. So Cadmus is a little put out by this situation. And he's like, you killed all my dudes. And so he kills the dragon. Now, Athena comes to him and says, for some reason, hey, now that the dragon's dead, why don't you tear all its teeth out and plant them like you would seeds?
Yeah.
So Cadmus is like, sounds like a plan. So he does that. And out of where the teeth are planted, like, warriors grow.
Yeah. Demons. Or skeletons in the movie.
They're called, well, no, but they're called Spartoi.
Spartoi?
Spartoi is
That
what they're
sounds
called.
familiar. Yeah.
It's which means sown men, like sown as in planted. So they grew out of there. For whatever reason, I don't really know why. Like, why Athena said, like, why to do this, but then, like, so all of these warriors grow out of the earth, like from the teeth. And then Cadmus decides, I'm going to fuck with these people. So he starts throwing rocks in the middle of all the warriors, and they start thinking each other is throwing rocks at them, so they start fighting each other.
Okay.
Which, okay.
Doesn't make any sense.
So they all kill each other until, like, only a few of them are left, which doesn't make any sense to me, but okay.
That's what I was... I thought that this sounded...
Like I said, this is a wild story.
It sounds very familiar. I thought maybe that was... They had a Ray Harryhausen version of this. Wasn't some of the teeth of a dragon used grown, like... Didn't it grow some demons in one of them?
That might have been another variation. Well, was that Jason and the Argonauts?
Jason and the Argonauts? Yeah.
One of the Ray
Harryhausen
Harryhausen
something that
movies.
came from that. But, this goes back to what I said earlier. Some of the Roman stuff and Greek stuff, the stories are religious in nature, but you don't understand what morality they're teaching you.
Right.
And when that little tale about getting them to fight each other because they grew from the dragon's teeth made sense to them.
Sure.
Because there's more to that story. That we
But
don't
I'm sitting there
understand.
going,
Yeah.
well, what was the point of that?
There's a point to it.
I'm sure there is.
It's referring to something else they believed in, and we don't have that.
Yeah.
That exists a lot in Roman religious mythology. Like in one of them, remember the damn girl's name. It might have been Daphne or something, or one of the Roman goddesses. She's running from another god, or lesser god, who grabs her to try to sexually assault her, and to get away from him, she turns into a tree, and she never turns back again. And we don't know what that story meant.
Here's the thing. Did she turn herself into a tree thinking she'd be able to turn back into a person? Or she's like, well, this is my one trick.
Nobody knows.
I'm going to use it up right now.
Yeah.
It's like, well, now I'm fucked. Now I'm a tree. So.
Last I heard of it, nobody really knew what the story meant.
Better than getting
I don't remember what
sexually
goddess it was.
assaulted,
Was
I
it
suppose.
Daphne? Sybil? Some
I
bullshit.
can't remember. Like, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I can't remember.
It's a very small story. It's Roman. It's a very short story. It's Roman. It's part of a larger story, if I remember correctly. But nobody really knows what value it was trying to teach. The closest I can think of it is they're just trying to say that she was so pure that she would rather
be a tree, right?
Than
which that makes sense to me.
Be defiled.
Sure,
that was the idea.
Because that's a pretty common trope in
I think
those
that's
kind of
probably
stories.
all it meant.
Yeah, like she would rather just be a fucking
A
tree.
tree than to take that dick.
Sure.
And the dude who did it was a hero in another story, if I remember correctly. He wasn't a bad guy. It's just he couldn't control himself. She was so beautiful. That type of deal.
That's what they all say.
Yeah. Well, I guess passion would run away with the Roman man or the Roman god, definitely. So you know what I mean. They couldn't control it.
Yeah, they had different views on things, I guess. I'm just like, you do that to people, you're not a good guy. I don't care
but she was in public though.
I don't care what else.
She was in public. She shouldn't have been wearing that dress.
Right.
You know.
You shouldn't have been like existing.
Just walking around.
What are you
pretty and
What
shit.
are you thinking?
You're too damn pretty dressed like that.
You can't walk around.
Shit's gonna
like
happen.
That. Come on, yeah.
That was the thinking though.
Yeah. Well, and sadly, some people still feel
like that in some countries.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Should have stayed home under your father's protection. That's
you can't ever go outside.
No,
you're
a
too
prisoner.
Pretty. Everyone's like, dicks will just be like flying at
Dick
you.
Dick gonna jump up and jump in you. That's all it is.
And there's nothing.
Never can tell. Never can tell.
It's not their fault. They can't help it.
Most of the dudes like that have never had an ass beating though. That's the problem.
Well, they clearly need one.
they never had an ass beating, so.
But you know what I mean. Maybe they'll have a few and they'll learn.
Yeah.
But you know. So yeah. So here's this. Okay. So this whole story, like I said, this is a crazy story and it doesn't make any sense to me. So all of these warriors grow out of the dragon teeth. And then Cadmus is like, ooh, ha ha ha, and he fucks with them and like makes them all kill each other. Well, not all of them. There's like a few of them left still, but I don't know what happens to them after that. So then Ares, who owned the dragon, who is protecting the spring, is mad because Cadmus killed his dragon, because that's kind of fucked up, right? So Cadmus had to be Ares' slave for 8 years. I don't know what that entailed. I'm imagining all kinds of things, but it's like, it could just be like, hey, go get me a beer from the fridge. Or it could have been, bend over for that.
Zach's here. He shows up. Tammy's teasing him.
Yeah. Yeah, you missed it, Jenny Peg Tom. Guess you won't leave again now, will you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know, you totally missed it.
Missed it, dude.
We did it on YouTube.
Got paid, too. Got a new Harley on the way.
Yeah, there you go. He just ordered it, right after it happened.
Yeah.
Right after it happened. One of these days, we'll have some millionaire that's really into our show.
Yeah.
And we'll pay that amount of money.
Got that new Sportster S cover.
And then you'll be sorry. Because you're going to have to let me do it then. Because you said.
That ain't never going to happen.
You said.
Then all of a sudden, some Saudi oil baron comes up and goes, "Oh, that's nothing. Yeah, sure. Yeah, fucking, I want this video on my desk fucking tomorrow."
Well, I mean, if we just had to send him a video, we could do that.
Look at her. She's trying to fucking sell my ass to the fucking phone. I don't, man, stop.
Hey, you were trying to sell my ass. You said if some like billionaire from the Middle East was gonna give me $250,000 to go spend a week on some yacht, he's like, yeah, I'm gonna pack your bags. So you better go. I was like, so yeah, same goes for you, buddy.
It's all in good fun.
Not just me.
It's all in good fun.
It's gotta be fair. I'm
Listen
not.
to this shit.
You gotta do same shit I gotta do. That's how that works. I'm just saying.
Oh man.
You would. Come on.
Man.
So yeah. So he got to be Ares' slave for 8 years. I don't know what that entailed. Like I said, I'm imagining all kinds of dirty shit. But yeah. Now at the end of the 8 years, though, he was able to marry the daughter of Ares and Aphrodite, who was named Harmonia. Lovely. And so then Cadmus and Harmonia moved to this place called Illyria, where they got to be king and queen. And then they also got transformed into dragons. 'Cause reasons. The end.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just like...
Wonder what that means.
What?
Yeah.
What? I mean, ancient Greece, you crazy. You crazy. That's a crazy story.
They hadn't figured out the art of the screenplay.
Although, not gonna lie,
yeah,
I would watch a movie with that plot. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but you know what's funny is that a lot of the Greek plays that have survived are real good. But there's something about their religious lore, their mythology.
Well, like I said,
we're calling it mythology, but for them it was religious lore. A lot of it didn't make sense. The Romans were the same way. I
read in school, like we did a whole thing about ancient Greek, like, Euripides and all that kind of stuff. And I actually read a few plays from back then, and a lot of them were good.
Yeah, a lot of them are good, yeah.
Like I said, the Euripides play Medea is excellent. I have it somewhere. That's a great fucking play. I mean, they still do performances of it nowadays. So, but like I said, a lot of their stories, there's a lot of different versions of it, and it's just like we've lost a lot of the context. It doesn't.
I think some of that religious stuff had expanded universe stuff that we don't have.
Sure. Yeah. Well,
I think there's a lot more to it we don't know.
Yeah, because, well, like I said, we don't really have the context. So it's like they might have known all of this other cultural shit that we don't, that's been lost since then.
Other stories answered stuff.
Right.
They're probably all interlocked.
And everybody's like, oh, yeah, we know this character, we know that character, we know this story. So it's probably a situation
it's calling
like that.
back. It's calling back. And there's probably Easter eggs and shit in it we wouldn't know.
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So yeah. And we mentioned earlier, but later on in the New Testament, Book of Revelation obviously mentions a great red dragon as well, that has a whole bunch of heads, 7 heads, 10 horns, 7 crowns, all of that.
Oh, that's the Whore of Babylon dragon.
Yeah.
The dragon, yeah.
So,
even though that's describing Rome.
Yeah. But they describe it in
the
terms of a dragon, which I thought was interesting, which might be reflecting back on the Leviathan image from the Old Testament.
They're saying the city of Rome is a bad fucking place. The heads and the horns represented emperors. It's just placing it in time. During the time of Nero is what it's talking about.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Norse mythology. Because there are a lot of dragons in Norse mythology as well, coming from Denmark, Iceland, Norway, all of those kind of places. So there was a story, probably the best known one. There's a dragon named Fafnir.
Yeah.
And he was killed by a guy named Sigurd. Now, what happened in this story, and it'll probably sound really familiar to you if you're familiar with the plot of Lord of the Rings, because this is kind of where J.R.R. Tolkien maybe got the idea from. So, in this story, there's a very rich dwarf king named Heidmar. Now, he had 3 sons who could shapeshift for reasons. Because people can shapeshift, I guess. Now, the Norse god Loki, he actually accidentally killed one of the sons, whose name was Otr, because he was shapeshifted into an otter. And Loki wanted the pelt.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So he killed him not knowing that it was a shape-shifting person, right? So he felt kind of bad. So he tells Heidmar, the dad, tell you what, I have this treasure that I stole from this other dwarf named Andvari. Now, one of the things that he gave him out of the treasure was a gold ring, and it was a cursed ring. Everybody that had it, it would like make you miserable and like cause people to die around you and shit like that. Which, like I said, very, very J.R.R. Tolkien. This is where he got the idea. The One Ring, yeah.
The One Ring, my precious.
Yeah. Now, and again, this is gonna even start sounding more like it in a second, because Heidmar, the dad, he gets the ring, and he started becoming completely obsessed with it. And he doesn't want his sons to know about it. He's my precious thing, it right?
Yeah. So
it was that. But they also, because the ring's kind of magical, I guess. So they're just kind of like, oh shit, I want that shit too. So Fafnir, one of the sons, murders his dad to get the ring, and then transforms himself, because he can shapeshift, into a dragon to watch over it.
Okay,
like Smaug.
Like Smaug, yeah.
Yeah, that's, like I said, that's where J.R.R. Tolkien got the idea from. Now,
even though Smaug didn't have the ring.
No, but he had like a treasure.
He had a bunch of treasure.
Like, yeah. So,
right.
Like I said, this is kind of like a similar kind of story.
Okay.
Now, Fafnir eventually gets killed by his brother's, well, I guess it's like his nephew? Kind of. Or like his brother's stepson, I guess. Now, the brother's stepson is supposed to go kill the dragon and steal the treasure and the ring. But the stepson also gets sucked in by the whole ring thing and ends up killing the stepdad, and like the curse continues. You know what I mean? Like the ring. So, like I said, this is very, very similar to the One Ring story, like with Gollum and everything like that from Lord of the Rings, because J.R.R. Tolkien was really into mythology, and he
read that story.
Yeah, he read this story because it's kind of famous, and this is kind of slightly.
There's a lot of Norse stuff in Tolkien.
What he based it on, yeah.
Dwarves making magical weapons and lichen gold and stuff. That's all Norse.
Yeah. Other dragons from Norse mythology include Nidhogg, I guess is how you pronounce that. And he's a dragon that supposedly lives under the Tree of Life, Yggdrasil. And he supposedly eats, like, bad people, like murderers and stuff. And he's kind of like a ambiguous figure. He's not like a bad guy or a good guy, but he's just like, he eats bad people, but he also is supposedly like brings balance to the universe. You know what I mean? Like he's like, so it's kind of like the Tree of Life is good, and then there's like this dragon underneath. It's like kind of like the bad thing, but it's sort of like ambiguous. You know what I mean? It's like it's a balance, like the light and dark side of the force or whatever. It's kind of like that. There's also another dragon who's called, oh my god, the pronunciation, Jormungandr.
Yeah.
He's also called the Dragon of Ragnarok, or the Great Beast. And he's supposedly,
the apocalypse.
Right. He's supposedly one of the sons of Loki and one of his wives. So, and again, like a big giant snake, like a big dragon. And one of the prophecies about him was that he was during Ragnarok, he was supposed to kill Thor. So this is the same serpent that was so big that he could encircle the earth.
Midgard serpent.
So the Midgard serpent, essentially, is what they're talking about. Now, like, interestingly, I kind of feel like a lot of the Viking mythology, the Norse mythology, their dragons were a lot more like big snakes.
Serpents, probably.
Yeah, they didn't really look as much like, and I kind of feel like a lot of, and particularly the Vikings who were really seafaring, a lot of seafaring cultures had stories about big giant sea monsters, and I'm sure that probably came from like shit they saw and like exaggerations of stuff they saw, and also because seafaring was very treacherous, so anything that you indulge in that is that treacherous is gonna, kind of have these big like fucking stories and legends and shit like that around it. So
a lot of the Norse weren't Vikings, of course. Only the men were, and the young ones. And it was only at certain times when they got desperate, when the farms weren't doing that well. I've read that a lot of the Norse were peaceful, stayed home a lot of times. The Vikings, I would probably think that they would go Viking. I'd always heard that, or in some sources that I remember reading. It's old though now because I haven't really looked at it recently. That the Vikings were more like the Norse version of the pirates. They're kind of equivalent to a pirate. Yeah. It wasn't really the norm, although they did have a big influence on the culture.
Yeah, and
they also had warrior cults that took a lot of drugs. Beezarkers, but Beezarkers would go into the Beezark. That was basically like a Viking, an elite Viking. They would go Viking. They'd go berserk too.
Yeah.
That was part of the thing, So, I don't know. It's hard to tell what's historical and what's legend with a lot of that.
And I think that's kind of true of a lot of cultures, But
because the Norse religion also had a big Christian and Roman influence on it.
Yeah.
People think that it's sprung up out of nowhere. No,
nothing does.
Nothing does. The Norse kind of colonized that area over time. The Northland. Their ancestors didn't come from there. And with them they brought the Roman alphabet, which you know them as runes. It's just a different version of the Roman alphabet. And it was how they wrote their language. But they also had a lot of magic and religions involved in it. Over time, they kind of morphed into Christianity, where they were believing in Norse mythos and Christianity at the same time, and towards the end part.
Yeah.
And then eventually they just kind of got rid of the Norse parts of it. The descendants of the Vikings didn't like the old culture. They thought it was too barbaric, I guess. You know,
Yeah.
just the way people are.
Yeah.
That happened a lot, even in England and shit. The descendants of the Saxons wanted nothing to do with their ancestors, that they were fucking savages, that kind of shit. You know what I mean?
Which, like, you can understand. You're like, look, I just want to fucking
Yeah,
chill
I'm a
out
normal
and, like,
person.
live
I
a
wanna
normal
kill
life.
everybody.
I don't want to, like,
Right.
fucking go out and get my ass stabbed and shit like that. It's not like much fun, does it? But yeah, so, the Norse word for dragons in general was Dreki, which was kind of like the Old English Drake, same kind of, the same root. And that was the same word that they used for, like, sea serpents, dragons, anything like sea monsters, anything like that. They also use that word to refer to certain types of ships, because some of their ships, you know, as most people know, had, like, dragon heads, like, carved on them, like, to intimidate people and stuff like that. So that's kind of what they called. So, like I said, dragons also a very large part of Viking culture. Now, in case I did not mention this before, which I don't think I did, I thought we brought up Beowulf a little bit. But Beowulf, the Old English poem, also has a dragon in it. Because the whole inciting incident of Beowulf is a person taking something from a dragon's hoard. Because, like I said, that was a very common thing in Western dragon mythology, was that dragons had treasure hoards and, like, guarded treasure hoards. I'm not entirely sure, like, why that came about, but that's a pretty common trope in Western dragon mythology, was them guarding treasures. So somebody goes in there, takes one thing from the hoard, the dragon wakes up and gets mad, because it's like, not like he doesn't have a million other things. He's just like, oh my god, that was my favorite thing. And then he just goes on a big fucking rampage. So Beowulf is like, okay, I'm gonna go fight this dragon all by myself, even though I'm an old fucking man. But then there's one of his 12 warriors, who's the youngest guy, whose name is Wiglaf. And he's like, no, I'm going to come with you, like, to help you fight this dragon. So when they're fighting the dragon, Beowulf, his sword breaks, like, in the fight, and he gets fucked up. Like, he doesn't get killed, but he gets, like, you know, he gets a bad enough wound that he's like, yeah, I'm going to die from this fucking shit. But Wiglaf comes and helps him kill the dragon. Beowulf dies, spoiler alert, and he tells Wiglaf, he's like, okay, well, all those other motherfuckers that didn't come with me to help kill the dragon, they're not going to get this fucking treasure. So you go bury that somewhere where they don't know where that is. You know what I mean? Because they didn't come help me out. So he was a little, like, bitchy in that regard. So as I mentioned earlier, what we consider the modern image of the dragon, like the one that flies around with the wings and breathes fire and shit like that, that's mainly from, like, the High Middle Ages. And that image comes from, like, a combination of, you know, the Greco-Roman stories, the Near East dragons, like Mesopotamia and stuff like that, the dragons they had there, and the biblical kind of stories about the dragons, and also kind of like folk tales, you know, about dragons from that era.
Yeah,
So,
high Middle Ages, the dominant force, cultural force, artistic force in that era would have been France too.
yeah.
So probably a lot of the imagery of dragons is, we would know them, you know, Europeans, white people. Probably French, a lot of that imagery.
Well, French, English,
Well,
Welsh.
They're using it, yeah. The French
Yeah.
are probably synthesizing it. Because a lot of stuff about Arthur, of course, is fucking French. You know, because you had English living in France.
Yeah.
You know, Brittany, that's why it's called that. The Normans and all that. So, probably a lot of that winged serpent, winged lizard concept might be French.
Possibly.
where probably the art came
Although, like I said, I'll get into it in a
from.
little
I
bit.
bet you if you look at fucking gargoyles and stuff, you're gonna find that. And those
Yeah,
would be
well, the
French.
interesting thing about, and I'm not really sure how much I believe this, but there is kind of like a backstory about gargoyles.
Yeah.
About like where they came from, that it was just kind of like, oh, there was this dragon that was called Gargoyle or something like that, and it's like there was like this story about it, and it's like now that we've defeated it, we're gonna put it on all the fucking cathedrals.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think that was kind of a backstory. Like I think they did that later, but I'm not really entirely sure why they put those on there. But yeah, that was another thing that like people went into. But I had that in my notes, but I was like, well, I don't know how relevant that is, so I kind of left it out. But yeah, so there was a lot of, so I feel like the heyday of like the dragon mythology was kind of between the 11th and the 13th centuries. So here's a very, like, kind of a famous story about that involved a dragon. And this happened in the 12th century. This was written up by Geoffrey of Monmouth, who was a monk, a Welsh monk, actually. And he wrote a story. He wrote a book that had a story about Merlin. That Merlin.
Yeah.
So, apparently, when Merlin was a kid, he sees Vortigern, who was a warlord. And he was trying to build, like, this castle, like a tower, on this mountain, or a hill, Mount Snowdon. To try and, like, keep his ass safe from the Anglo-Saxons, right? But every time he tried to build this tower, it kept getting, like, fucking sucked into the earth for some reason. Merlin, who was, kind of magical and everything, he says, well, you know why that's happening is that underneath this hill, there's, like, a pool or, like, a body of water, and there's 2 dragons sleeping in it. So you might want to sort that out. So Vortigern calls the medieval equivalent of, the plumber or whatever the fuck. And he comes and they drain the pool, like, underneath this hill. And indeed, they do find 2 dragons in there sleeping. There's a red one and a white one. Now, as soon as they drain all the water out, the 2 dragons start fighting with each other, because I guess the water was the only thing keeping them from fighting.
They were sleeping.
They were sleeping before, and they're like, now we're awake, we're bad, pow! Yeah. And they start fighting. Merlin says, well, the white dragon is gonna beat the red one, which most people would recognize as symbolizing England, the white dragon, triumphing over Wales, the red dragon. And that is indeed what happens in the story. So this was a very popular story. If you don't know, the Welsh flag has a red dragon on it, and that's kind of like their mascot.
Their version of it
is the red dragon. Yeah, their flag is like actually really cool. It's like it's green on the bottom and white on the top, and then it's like a big red dragon in the front. And that's like a big thing in Wales, like that red dragon thing. But yeah, so that might be why, because of this story. It's the red dragon versus the white dragon. It's like Wales versus England is kind of what that story means. So yeah. So this was like a hugely popular story throughout the 15th century. Now, as I mentioned earlier, probably the first image of what we would recognize as like the modern dragon with like the wings and the fire breathing and everything like that comes from a painting, or like an illustration rather, from like a medieval manuscript from around 1260. Now, in this illustration, the dragon has a bunch of wings and it has like a big long tail and everything like that, but it kind of looks like what you would recognize like as a modern dragon, and that's pretty much the first time that you see all of the features that you'd recognize as a modern dragon in a picture. So from 1260. Now, in this time period, as in Asia, dragons are generally associated with water, as living in rivers or seas or something like that, or as living in caves or underground. That's another thing that comes about in the Middle Ages. They're also generally considered negatively. They're seen as greedy. They generally just want to eat maidens. That's a big thing. And because of Christianity, because of the influence of Christianity, they're usually associated with Satan. So it's generally always considered a bad thing. There's actually a story from the 13th century, which is very famous. And this story was originally written in Latin, but, kind of spread outward after that. And this is the story of Saint Margaret of Antioch, who was a martyr. She was a virgin. And she got tortured for being a Christian and kind of thrown back into her jail cell or whatever. And then she somehow comes across this big-ass dragon. In some versions of the story, she just, makes a cross at him like you would at a vampire, and the dragon disappears. However, in the better versions of the story, she actually gets eaten by the dragon. And then she makes the sign of the cross inside the dragon's stomach and then pops out okay. You know what I mean? Which is much better, obviously. Because it's not cool to just be oh, go away, dragon. He's just oh no, poof. But it's if you actually get eaten by the dragon and then you're making the sign of the cross inside the that's much more badass. So yeah, I like that version of the story better. Where she just pops out and she's yeah, I'm fine. So, also, in case you thought that I wasn't going to mention this, probably easily the most famous story in England is St. George. Obviously, he's the patron saint of England. And every single image you see of St. George, he's killing a dragon. Because that's the most famous story about him. Earliest version of the story that they know of comes from the 6th century. And the kind of most famous version of the story. So there's this dragon, and it keeps fucking up. There's this town in Libya called Cylene, I think is how you pronounce it. So the dragon keeps coming there and eating all their sheep. So they're not happy about that. So it eats the sheep, and then it eats a shepherd, which they're really not happy about. And so then they're dude, okay, can you not eat the people? So they start putting 2 sheep a day out for the dragon to eat. It's please do not eat the people. Just have these, thank you. And it's that. But eventually, the dragon, because it's a dragon, eats all of the sheep. And at this point, they're okay, well, now we have to start feeding it the people. So they start doing a lottery where, we're going to put your person out every day. I'm sorry about that. You know what I mean? So they start doing that. Now, one day...
And nobody moves, of course.
No, yeah.
I would have fucking... I'm out of here.
I mean, yeah, no. I don't really like the town where you just you might get eaten by a dragon. I don't really like that idea. Thank you very much, Jeffy Art. Yeah, Saint Margaret was the xenomorph of dragons. Yeah, she just did that shit from inside the stomach. I love that. But so yeah, so they do the lottery. Now one day in the lottery, the king's daughter, the princess, comes up in the lottery, and the king's oh no, she's the princess. She's special. We can't not like these hoi polloi. You know what I mean? We can't have that. But everybody in the town is nah, man. She's the same as the rest of us. She came up in the lottery, so sorry. Put the fucking wedding dress on her and put her out there to get eaten by the dragon. You know what I mean? So she gets put out there to get eaten by the dragon.
In a wedding dress.
In the wedding dress, yeah, because that's what you had to do, apparently. I don't know if they did that to the boys or what. But they put them in the wedding clothes.
Trying to make her ass look pretty as possible on her wedding.
The dragon doesn't care.
Yeah.
Maybe he likes his food.
It's a medieval story, man.
I
This
know.
This is their thinking. They're trying to get the audience to go, damn, they're going to feed her that pretty ass fucking rich girl. Going to put her out there.
Going to put the wedding dress on her and everything.
Ray, she was in a cocktail dress, right?
Yeah, well, that's what I mean.
They knew what they're doing.
King Kong is a modern version of that.
Yeah.
So she's out there in a wedding dress, chained to the rock or whatever, waiting for the dragon to come eat her. So it so happens that St. George moseys on by. I don't know what he was doing prior to this, farting around somewhere. So he comes on by and he's oh no, we can't have this happen. All of the other people in the village have been eaten and he didn't come by and help anybody. But now that it's the princess, now I'm going to take notice. You know what I mean? So he comes by and he's just okay, we can't have this. So he stabs the dragon with his little lance or whatever. And then he makes the sign of the cross at it because that was something that was supposedly going to work. And then he takes the princess's girdle off. And I was like, how'd you get that off from under the wedding dress? Like, what's going on here?
Wedding dress might not be built the way you're imagining.
Maybe not. I'm kind of thinking girdle is something that goes underneath.
Maybe
so I'm like,
not.
did she get naked or what's? I'm overthinking
it's like an
it,
external
clearly.
corset.
Okay, maybe.
Like wearing
But like I said, generally.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Bryce. Thank you.
What's up, Bryce?
Loving this episode. I think everyone mythologized reptiles or fish. It seems to be everywhere. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Some think Queen Elizabeth was a lizard man. Yeah. We should probably do a show about that one of these days too. Like the whole lizard man thing.
Yeah.
But because that's kind of fascinating. Although that would probably just make me mad. But you know what I mean. So yeah, so I got kind of hung up on this whole like princess girdle detail. So he takes her girdle off somehow and wraps it around the dragon's neck, which somehow like subdues it because she's a virgin, I guess. I don't really know.
Wait, but she puts a girdle around its neck?
He put the girdle around its neck.
Okay.
And well, he stabbed it with a lance too, but he didn't kill it.
Yeah.
So then it's like it chills it out.
Yeah, it thought that shit was sexy.
He's like,
Oh, hell yeah.
all right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I don't want to eat her
Came
anymore.
from around her? Yeah, this is hot.
It's yeah. So that's
That might be what they're talking about.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
It's like, yeah, you said put the garter on it. Put a
Yeah,
garter
maybe, yeah.
It's like saying I put a garter belt
It's like
on
putting
it.
her panties on there.
Yeah, put her panties on it. That's probably exactly what it's talking
Yeah.
about.
So
You put the
we're
panties
saying
over-
girdle, but it's panties, maybe.
Put the panties over it. And it's just like that thing was like, oh hell yeah. Yeah. It starts simping. It starts simping its ass off. It's his weakness.
It really
It's
does.
his weakness. So basically, what you're saying is that okay, this is the combination of male and female energy. That's what's destroying the dragon.
Yeah.
You got this brave dude with a weapon, and then a woman's sexuality's helping, bringing
Is yeah.
bringing
It's
it,
chilling it out.
chilling it out, so you make it weak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it doesn't kill it. Like I don't know where he stabbed it with the lance.
Yeah.
But he's got like the girdle or the panties, if you prefer. And so
Probably they wanted to say panties, but they couldn't.
but they're like, oh, that's
they
dirty.
had to censor that. So
That's
they called
dirty,
it-
we
That's
can't
what
say
they.
it.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
the thinking.
So Saint George then brings the dragon, who is now just like a little puppy on a leash, I guess.
Yeah.
And they bring him back into the town. Now here's where it gets kind of shitty because Saint George says, you know, I could kill this dragon for you if all you motherfuckers convert to Christianity.
Okay.
Like otherwise what? He's just gonna like let it keep it. That seems like blackmail.
Yeah.
Just gonna say.
No, he in the thinking of the
Just
time,
gonna
he's doing
say.
what's best for them. He's saving your souls. I'm gonna save your souls.
Yeah. If
If
y'all
you
all
if you accept Christ as your savior, you will go to heaven, and I'm saving your souls. And as a reward, I'll
this
kill
is
it.
all for you.
Yeah, it's all for you.
And I'll kill the dragon for
Yes,
you.
he's hero as a motherfucker.
Like I said, sounds like
Yeah,
a little
and
bit like
and-
blackmail.
yeah, and they've combined the sacred feminine and the fucking masculine together to get this done. I see what they did.
Yeah, I mean, I see it too. But like I said, in modern parlance, it seems a little bit like blackmail.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, if you don't convert to Christianity, then I'm just gonna
Let
let
this bitch eat
I'm
you
just
up.
gonna let a bitch eat you.
Well, you're sinners. You deserve what's going to fucking happen to you. We're all going to die anyway. You're going to die now, and you're going to go to hell. But if you fucking convert, I'll save you.
Yeah.
God will save you. I'll help God.
Because like,
save you.
look, I got him
Yeah,
right
yeah,
here,
yeah.
like
That's
on a
what they're
leash,
doing.
like a little puppy dog,
Yeah.
and then I could kill him.
Yeah, and only a man and woman can do this together.
Yeah,
That's what they're doing.
happened.
Because there's chivalry going on here.
So of course that's why. So everyone's like,
Yeah.
"Oh yes,
Yeah.
okay, well, we'll all convert to Christianity. Please kill the
Yeah.
dragon." So whatever. So he did kill the dragon with his sword or whatever.
Yeah.
So like I said, that's Saint George. Now in some versions of the story, he actually married the princess, of course, because that's how fairy tales end. But in some of them, he just kept on wandering like fucking Zatoichi.
He's like, fuck it, I got,
So or Mad Max or whoever.
To slay, I got other women
I got other shit to do. I just
I
like
got women to save.
yeah, that's what I mean. I got other women to save from getting eaten by dragons, and you
Yeah.
know what I mean. I can't tie myself
That way
down
you can use the
to one
character.
maiden.
That way you can use the character in other stories.
Sure, like I said,
right.
it's like if you can
Yeah.
do an expanded universe. Like I said, it's like Zatoichi or
Yeah.
you know the man with
Guarantee
no name or
we only have
whatever.
some of these stories. There's
Sure.
probably a lot of them lost. There's probably a lot of sequels to it. like in movies, but the sequels weren't as good, so they had to stay. They didn't stay.
Probably not. I mean, because obviously that's probably the most famous story. Well, that's the most famous story about dragons in England for sure.
Yeah.
Because like I said, St. George is like their patron saint. You know what I mean? And you see, if you go to the UK, there's like imagery of St. George slaying the dragon like everywhere, all over the place. So yeah, and there's a lot of dragons in heraldry as well, and that also comes from the Middle Ages. And I kind of feel like, I think we kind of brought this up before, but in the Middle Ages, I kind of feel like that was when the distinction came about between a dragon, which has 4 legs, and a wyvern, which has 2 legs.
Yeah. Before you go too deep off into this, explain to them what heraldry is, in case people from other countries don't know what that is.
Well, I would have thought that everybody knew what that was,
No, you might
but
have
it's just
foreigners.
kind of, well, I mean, you have like a family crest or like a shield,
Yeah.
and it has like all of these different things on it that are symbolic of your family line
and your station, and
Yeah.
It was, most people were illiterate in this era. A lot of the nobles were illiterate, but you could tell a person's status, what their family name is, because they're associated with colors and patterns and symbols like a rampant lion or a rampant dragon, or a head of or a helmet painted on the shield.
Different kind of flowers,
Different
like
kind of-
all
yeah,
there was
different
all different
wreaths
kind of
and
like
stuff.
symbolism.
And that symbol, if you saw it, usually it's on a shield or on a crest above a door, or outside somebody's tent. You would know what that guy's name is and how powerful he is, what family he's from, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because everything meant something.
And everything meant something. It was symbolism.
Yeah.
It was like emojis. It was like emojis for the illiterate.
Yeah.
And most people were illiterate, but it was very beautiful art. If you ever see anything from any of these medieval knight acts that you can see, and they have these fucking pretty symbols on the shields and flags and shit, that's heraldry.
Yeah.
Emojis.
Erica said those stories of St. George and such are metaphors for like getting rid of the pagan. Same with St. Patrick chasing away all the snakes in Ireland. Yeah, I agree. And then she says my family coat of arms on my mom's side is a unicorn. Yeah, some of them did have unicorns on
Yeah, it was
them.
real British.
So I thought that was like pretty cool.
There's also things called clan tartans, which is a plaid pattern.
Yeah, that's a Scottish thing.
It's a Scottish thing. I think the Irish and the Welsh have it too, though.
Yeah, I don't know. So like not so much the Welsh, but yeah, the
that's
Scottish.
okay.
That's more of a Scottish.
But it was
thing.
part of your garb, your kilt and your jacket, and it said, it basically told you what your last name was, depending on the pattern.
Yeah. John Robertson said heraldry is fascinating. The Robertson family of Scotland has a red shield with 3 silver wolf heads on it and a hand holding the Scottish crown on the helm on the top. Yeah, so like it's pretty weird. Like my maiden name, which was Mitchell, my dad looked up one time like the heraldry, because I guess that's an Irish name. I can't even remember what the shield looked like now. What the fuck was on that? I'd have to look it up again. I don't remember. But he did like kind of show it to me like one time, like with all the symbolism on it. But it's like pretty interesting. Maybe we should do a show on that.
Yeah.
That might be interesting. So let's talk a little bit about, we're going to talk about like North and South American dragons. And then we're going to talk about maybe where all of these
Names
came from. You know what I mean? So I knew this was going to be a long show, but I mean, it's not too bad. We're just at 3 hours. And like I said, I really did cut it down from how long it was before. I went through like earlier today and I'm just like, I gotta take that out, I gotta take that out. I had to take so much stuff out, but you know what I mean? So yeah, so let's talk about a little bit about, and I feel like a lot of people don't really associate Native American or Meso-American mythology with dragons, but a lot of the creatures that they describe are very dragon-like, and I think that you would recognize them as dragons, like, you know what I mean? So they're just not like as well known, I guess. So one of the most famous ones, I guess, is the Piasa. I'm guessing that that's how you pronounce it. Now, this has been depicted on several like kind of limestone like rock walls and stuff like that. There's like drawings of it. Probably the most famous one is in Illinois, in Madison County. And this is kind of like, it has like kind of bird wings, but then it has like kind of claws, like bird or bat kind of claws. And then it has gold scales on its body, like reptilian. And then on its head, it has like horns, like an elk. And it has like a big, long, spiky tail. So it doesn't really look like maybe like a classical dragon, but if you showed it to somebody, they'd probably say, hey, that kind of looks like a dragon kind of thing. Because, you know, it's, like I said, it's an amalgamation of like a bunch of different animals. There's also another kind of dragon-like thing from right around the Great Lakes region. And it kind of looks like it has like a cat sort of body, but it has like scales on it, and then it has like a reptile type of tail, and then it has like bull horns. You know what I mean? So again, kind of drag. This is from like Native American.
Okay.
This is Native American. We're going North and South American at this point.
Okay, so they combined animals that they've seen before.
Yeah. So
lions.
So like I said, which is what the European and Asian conception of the dragon, it was a compilation of animals.
Yeah.
It's snake-like, but there's other stuff.
These are North American Indians?
This is, yeah.
This one? Yeah,
this one
they're
is,
talking about mountain lions and probably bison. You know,
yeah.
the horn. I had to see the horns. It's not deer antlers. It's curved horns like on a bull or...
Kind of, yeah.
Well, they didn't have bulls. So it wasn't native there. What they're talking about is a bison. You know,
But they do have but they have wings on them, like bird wings, and then they have like claws, like bird claws.
Oh yeah, well they saw a condor and
sure, that's what I mean.
Eagles.
So it's the same conception.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like it's the same idea.
Yeah, I don't think they saw condors up here.
And
eagles.
North American Indians also have serpent-like creatures. You have one, like I said, I'm sure the pronunciation of this is going to be like really, really bad. But there's one called the Kenepequa.
That sounds like Indian word.
Was a big land snake. And that it would grow by shedding its skin off, and then it would go and become like a sea serpent.
Yeah.
So there was one of those. There was one from actually Seminole mythology, which is from Florida. And this pronunciation, there are no vowels in this, so I'm going to be like, have a hard time. Stukwavnaya. I don't know. There's lots of V's and W's in there. I'm not sure if I pronounce that.
Well,
anyway.
The Seminoles were from here.
Yeah.
A lot of them accepted American citizenship during the Trail of Tears era. Other ones got moved up, I think, above Texas, if I remember correctly. Might have, so that could have been up there, too, not just Florida.
Yeah.
If they brought that myth with them.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But this one was a big sea serpent with horns. And interestingly, the horns of it were considered by the Seminole to be an aphrodisiac. Mm. So they were always trying to catch it. You know what I mean? Like to get the horns so they could like grind it up and eat it, I guess. And then there was another one that actually sounds a lot like a European dragon, even though stories of this come from before the Europeans arrived here. And this is called the Gasiendietha. Not really sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. This one is from Seneca mythology. And also, like Asian dragons, lived in lakes and rivers. And it also flew and breathed fire, which is kind of interesting. Because a lot of...
it sounds like a dragon.
Yeah, it sounds like a dragon. Now, Meso-America... was I think more people know about that. Like have a lot of kind of serpent-like, dragon-like myths that are kind of similar. The main difference between Mesoamerican dragon-like creatures and European and Asian ones is the Mesoamerican ones tend to have feathers. And that might be because of all the tropical birds, I'm thinking. You know, in the Mesoamerican area from the jungles and stuff like that. Like, maybe that's why, because they saw, like, a lot of tropical birds that had these really colorful feathers, and so they added that to their mythology.
Could be.
Possibly.
Could be that they saw snakes, too.
Yeah.
which meant that they probably were killing and eating snakes. Part of that process might involve descaling that snake, same way you descale a fish. You may have noticed that scales and feathers are basically the same thing.
Yeah, they are.
So they
are.
They are the same thing.
They're made of the same material.
So
it's just a different
if you're gonna envision
configuration.
If you're gonna envision a badass snake as something that was from the heavens and respect from the gods,
I gotta pee again.
Like a snake, a godlike superhuman fucking snake, a superior supreme being type snake. You might want to imagine that snake having feathers. So, because it can fly. Well, so what the Meso-Americans are talking about is something kind of like a Chinese dragon, because that flew too and didn't have wings. They flew by spiritual power. They levitated. So that could be what they're talking about in Meso-America, associated with the sun, celestial stuff. So that's probably what they're talking about. Because people like the Meso-Americans and of course the North Americans, they had cities. Mesoamerica had cities at this time. The time the Cortez showed up in the 1400s, their cities were bigger than anything in Europe. But they didn't have the wheel. They didn't really have paved roads. They farmed all throughout the countryside. Then they were real well attuned to nature and animals. They saw these animals all the time. Now, if you're in the city, you're probably the only animals you're going to see are maybe some expensive pet or something that's being sold as food in the market. But it's totally plausible that if you're trying to create a religious story about supreme beings who are serpents that come from the heavens, the scales being feathers would be a good explanation of how they fly.
Yeah. And like I said, maybe they didn't. I mean, now we know that scales and feathers are essentially the same thing.
I'm sure they looked at it and go, that's basically the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it looks similar if you look at it close.
Birds fly because they have feathers.
Yeah.
They have wings. If you have a flying serpent from the heavens, it's got feathers on it. That's what makes it fly.
Yeah. I mean,
that's what they're doing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's what they're doing.
Well, and like I said, I mean, feathers...
We're not talking about the intricacies of fucking aerodynamics.
Right.
If a bitch's got feathers on it, it's going to fly.
Yeah.
So that's the same thing as a Chinese dragon.
Yeah. Because feathers are modified scales.
Yeah.
Is all they are.
Yeah, so your snake's feathers, your snake scales are feathers.
And maybe just instinctively, they kind of understood that.
Yeah, they kind of understood it. But that explains why it flies and
right.
how it's in the heavens.
Yeah.
That's what they're talking about.
Yeah. The interesting thing about a lot of the Central and South American quote-unquote dragons is that a lot of them, much like the Asian ones, they were generally either, I don't want to say like necessarily good guys, but they weren't evil. They were either ambiguous figures in that they could be good or bad, just like nature could be. Or they were helpful. You know what I mean? Or they were... gods of something.
Yeah.
They weren't really seen negatively as they were in Europe.
Yeah. Their snakes had feathers. Their flying serpents had feathers on them.
They did, yeah. And they were usually like multicolored. They had multicolored scales, multicolored feathers.
Think about it.
They're really cool looking, I thought.
If the person trying to tell this story is living in the United States in the 1960s, it's not going to have scales on it. It's not going to have feathers on it. It's going to have rockets on it. All right? That makes it fly. Makes it fly into outer space, the heavens. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Humans are ingenious, man. They're freaking ingenious. That was how they explained flight.
We come up with some good shit sometimes. Like, I really love the creativity of all the stories. Like, before they knew what was going on, really, they're like, well, we just have to have a story to, explain it. So they came up with, some really cool shit. I mean, you know what I mean? That's really cool. But, yeah, so probably the most famous of the Central South American dragon-like creatures were, as we mentioned earlier, Quetzalcoatl, who was basically a flying snake. I mean, he didn't have any legs, really, but he had wings, though. And he had scales and feathers.
And wings.
Yeah, and wings.
So he's the dragon.
And he was a
Yeah.
shapeshifter.
Okay.
He could transform into a person,
dragon can do that.
into a man.
A dragon.
Which, like I said,
too.
there's some precedent for that,
Yeah.
like in European and ancient
Yeah.
Greek and stuff like that in stories. Like
Yeah.
some dragons or some people could transform into dragons and vice
Yeah.
versa. And in Norse mythology,
I'm
that was
convinced.
kind of
Quetzalcoatl was a dragon. That's what it
yeah.
is.
Well,
That's
I
what
mean,
it is.
he looks kind of like a
Yeah.
dragon, pretty much. And the thing about it was that he not only could transform into a person, but he could also transform into the sun.
Yeah.
And when there was a solar eclipse,
So that's why they said it's the
that
first
was
serpent.
supposedly the earth serpent swallowing Quetzalcoatl.
Yeah. Okay.
Like it was kind of like a thing like that.
I didn't know the story that equated Quetzalcoatl with the sun. I didn't realize. I thought the sun
Yeah.
was a separate entity, but he can become the sun if he needs to.
If he wants to.
Okay.
But I don't think he's the sun all the time. But he
Okay.
can become the sun if
Okay,
he wants
gotcha.
to.
Gotcha.
He was also, Quetzalcoatl, also called Kukulkan, just like your drink.
Yeah.
He was the only, as far as I know, the only god from this pantheon that did not request human sacrifices. Like he didn't want them.
He didn't need him.
Yeah, I guess he was
Yeah.
too cool. I
Right.
guess.
Yeah.
And there are actually stories in the mythology about Quetzalcoatl fighting with some of the other gods about that.
Yeah, seeing it was not cool.
Like that's not cool, but like the
right.
other gods are like, no,
Okay.
it absolutely is cool. We want all the
So,
human hearts and
Quetzalcoatl
whatnot.
Almost sounds kind of like a El Shaddai or a God
Right.
Almighty figure, like a father
Yeah, very
of the
similar.
gods.
Very
The
similar.
father of the gods,
Yeah.
where he's strong, but he's kind of on your side.
Yeah.
So that, and El Shaddai at first demanded the firstborn.
Which is kind of a dick move.
Yeah, early Jews sacrificed the firstborn. It's been proven because they found all the fucking clay pots with the sacrificed babies in it. Now, one of
Man,
El
you got to believe some shit real
Yeah.
hard to be doing that.
yeah, I think
stuff.
they were doing it. They may have been doing that when
'Cause-
they were also calling
I don't believe anything that
Yahweh.
hard.
They also,
No way.
When they were calling El Shaddai Yahweh after the Moses period, we don't want. They may have been doing that too, but all the fucking Yahweh's brothers, like Molech and Baal, they all demanded sacrifice too, child sacrifice.
Like they're gods. What the fuck they need that shit for? They just want to like see if you'll do it.
It was to whoever was in charge of those societies wanted to make sure loyalty was absolute. I would think.
Yeah,
That's what it's about.
because that's.
You'll give up your firstborn.
I wouldn't want to worship any god that
Yeah.
asked me to do that shit. No.
Well, he
thanks.
demanded the firstborn of Egypt too. Remember?
Yeah,
in
I
the fucking
know.
Nile stories.
I know.
He made that shit happen. Basically, he
They're
was
like,
saying
nah.
these Egyptians, they're in fucking debt. You haven't given me the firstborn. I'm gonna get you to yield to me. And he's fucking whipping at Egypt like a whipping boy in the fucking during the plagues story.
Yeah, I'm gonna send
what they're
all the
talking
fucking
about.
locusts and the
Yeah,
frogs
Logos, and I'm gonna take your
and
firstborn because you owe
the
me
river
that.
turning to blood and all that.
Right, yeah,
nonsense.
right. That's
Sure.
that's what he's doing.
And the
there.
boils and all of that.
Yeah, so that's what they're doing. So it could be Quetzalcoatl was kind of like the Meso-American version of Yahweh.
I mean-
after the sacrifice period.
Yeah.
And that story's told in the Old Testament as staying the hand of Isaac,
Yeah.
where the angel comes down, stops Isaac. No, don't.
Nah,
sacrifice
don't
him.
do it.
So that story is kind of commemorating the or El Shaddai and Yahweh no longer require sacrifice.
Right.
So that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean,
Quetzalcoatl.
Quetzalcoatl seems like he was kind of like the creator god, right? And he was like god of other
Yeah.
things too. Like he
Right.
was god of the evening star, god of the morning star, god of the winds. He was a fire bringer.
Yeah.
He was supposedly created the calendar
Right.
also. So yeah, he was kind of like the top,
Right.
but he was also kind of like a dragon, even
Yeah.
though he could turn into a
A
person.
lot of times, the Aztecs and the Mesoamericans and the Mayan, we're talking about the Mayans and the Aztecs. The Aztecs were a type of Mayan. Okay. They sacrificed humans most of the time, actually, not to appease or to satisfy good gods. It was to appease demons that were trying to hurt them. And this is according to Catholic monks that were there on site trying to get them to stop doing it. They were afraid that the system would break down, the sun wouldn't come back, and that evil would take over if you didn't placate all these fucking evil demons.
Right.
So they eventually got him to stop it by giving him a huge pantheon of the saints that were kind of like their other god. There's a lot of crossover between the Catholic pantheon of gods and saints to what the Aztecs and the Mayans believed in. They had their own equivalents to say like the Virgin Mary, and their own equivalent to say like some saint, that they would be and demons. They had their own versions of it. They said it was real similar actually. The priests said that.
Yeah.
That what they believed is really similar to what the Catholics believed in.
I kind of feel like left to their own devices, most humans will come up with the same kind of stories.
Yeah.
Because we're all very similar. Like our brains are very similar. They evolved in a similar way.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like most people, even if raised in isolation, will come up with similar stories.
Yeah. Even the old Spanish that were there in the 1500s were reporting back to the Vatican that these people are not worshiping devils and demons. They're worshiping good gods. It's just that they're trying to appease these demons that they're afraid of.
Right.
They're trying to buy them off.
Yeah, they understood it.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't that different.
Wasn't that different, right.
Sure. Bryce says, among my people, every tribe believes they are protected by a human lizard-like creature. They're worshipped, represented as human fish lizard-like creatures, but they're actually spirits. Each one has a name, too.
Okay.
Aztec and Maya are very interesting. They are, and I kind of feel like a lot of people don't know that much about them, which is kind of a shame. But,
What you're saying, Bryce, is that, and I guess it's a Maori belief, each Maori is protected kind of by what Muslims would call a jinn, that you have your own protective jinn. Other people call it genie. It's a spiritual creature made of fire or spiritual energy, and it does its own thing in another dimension. It's never lived as a mortal creature. It lives in another dimension. So that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Protective spirit. Be kind of like having your own jinn. That's how a Muslim might explain that. Or
yeah, and I kind of feel like that's... Well, people have, in various other traditions, have... I guess like guardian angels.
Guardian angel.
So it would be a similar concept.
Right.
That's a similar concept.
Guardian angel or your own personal jinn or genie. Fulfilling wishes, protecting you. Although a jinn could be deceptive. In Islamic lore, they could be evil, they could be good, they could be Christians, they could be Muslims, Jewish jinn, and
you never knew what you were
devil
going to
worshipping jinn too. They're evil ones.
But so you didn't know what you were going to get.
Yeah.
Which I like that better
like
because
people.
that. Well, yeah, that's what I mean. I kind of like that better because it's sort of like realistic.
You didn't really know what they were like.
It's like even in the spirit world, it's like people might be like fucking you over, or they might be, you know what I mean? So it's just like reality.
The jinn, according to Islamic lore, the jinn also they not only they have personalities and individuality and their own religions, they also had jobs, and they had property. Some of them tended sheep in another dimension. They had flocks and houses.
Look, I have to live in another dimension and I
still
have to have a job. Fuck that.
Well, they were a parallel creation
that
God had made, but they're an extra-dimensional being living in a slightly other dimension. They can access us, though. Sometimes. I'd have to ask Saad or Muslim.
See, like I said,
to know
that
how
is,
they
like, really interesting.
how they access us, but they can access us in certain times.
Well, now, I mean, since we're talking about Quetzalcoatl, and I think you've brought this up before, but the fact that Quetzalcoatl, who, like I said, is usually portrayed as like a winged serpent, so that's like a dragon, essentially, but could transform into a person.
Yeah.
And there was a story that he sailed east on a raft, which was made of snakes or whatever, and saying he would come back. So when the conquistadors came, they kind of like found out about that story and claimed that they were Quetzalcoatl returned. Right. Because it's like he was a white dude that came back. Yeah.
Well, he's in a Western interpretation would be it's El Shaddai or Yahweh. He had an only son that came and taught things to the Aztecs. And then he goes off saying he will return one day. That's almost the story of Jesus.
Yeah.
He was the Son of God. I'm leaving. I wasn't killed. I survived crucifixion. I'll be back. So that's, Jesus. So, yeah, and I'm sure the monks noticed that.
Oh yeah, big
I'm
time.
sure they did. So, Kul Khan was Jesus. That's the Aztec Jesus.
Like I said, that trope
Yeah.
reappears all over the world.
Yeah.
It's a very common trope.
So you got Cortez saying, "Look, I'm Jesus returned."
Yeah, because they knew about
what they're
that.
saying, yeah.
Like, because they had heard about that. So they're
he's
like,
telling
oh my God, we're going to use that shit.
Yeah.
And we're going to say, hey, I'm
They're
the
like,
guy.
"You're Jesus?"
I'm
Yeah.
Quetzalcoatl. I'm
Right.
returned.
Right.
Like, he was supposed to come out like he's a white guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He was described as white with a beard, mustache, and all that.
Right.
And
So
then
when
from
he came
across
back.
the ocean on
Yeah.
a barge or a ship.
Yeah.
The Aztecs had no concept of a ship. They knew what little pontoon type little things were, because they could get into rivers with them and stuff. When they first saw ships, they thought it was a mountain in the ocean surrounded by a moving mountain on the ocean surrounded by white clouds.
Yeah, because it
Filled
was
with
like
people
those
on
big
it.
Spanish
They
like,
could
ships
not
were
process a ship.
because they never seen one that big.
Yeah, some kind of floating mountain with clouds on it.
Yeah, what the
The
fuck
clouds,
is
of
that?
course, being the sails.
Right. But yeah, and like I said, the Spanish, once they found out about
Yeah.
that Quetzalcoatl thing, they're just like, oh my God, we're totally like
Yeah.
exploiting that nonsense right there.
Yeah, they just,
Yeah.
it's funny though. They see that ship and they have no vocabulary for it.
Well, yeah, they'd never seen anything like that.
I think they knew what it was when they saw it, but they couldn't
I mean, they
describe
knew what a
it.
boat was,
They-
obviously, but it's
yeah.
like they'd never seen,
Never seen something that fucking big.
something that big.
Yeah,
like, so
and
they
never
didn't really
seen sails.
right. Didn't really process like what that was.
Yeah, I think they knew what it was. Something in the water with people on it, and there was big sails, but I don't think they had a vocabulary to describe it when they got back to the city. They came in a mountain that moves through the water,
Yeah.
and the mountain has clouds around it. It's
Yeah.
that's what it is. They're trying to describe something that they don't have vocabulary for.
Yeah.
They couldn't say sails. They didn't have that word.
Yeah, they're just trying
They
to
didn't
like
have
couch
they're
it
trying to
in
describe it. Right.
words that they knew.
Right. It's
Like,
like
you
a
know what I mean?
mountain that's moving in the water. A big fucking thing that you can stand on. It's moving in the water. So you got guys running around on deck.
Yeah.
That's what. If they're seeing those big masts, it's like a mountain. Clouds, big clouds. It's being pushed by the clouds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I can't imagine. That must have been really weird, like
Yeah.
seeing that fucking shit.
Yeah.
Here's something that never really occurred to me until I read this, and I was just like, oh yeah, I guess so. Another thing that would probably be called a dragon would be the Haitian concept of Damballa, because he is a serpent god.
Okay.
It's a big ass snake.
Okay.
And he's like the father deity,
Yeah.
like in voodoo, essentially.
Okay.
And that really never occurred to me. I'm like, yeah, he's kind of like he's like a big snake. You know what I mean?
Almost kind of like the Midgard serpent.
Yeah. So that kills me that I never thought of
Even
it.
though
But I
he
was
wasn't
just
the
like,
father of the gods, but
no. But it's
they're-
just kind of like one
Yeah.
that they ask for things and stuff like that. So it's
Yeah.
just like that's kind of still a dragon, and he's kind of based around like fertility as well, in which some dragons are. Also got a couple of other ones, which you have an Aztec goddess called Coatlicue, she was usually represented as a human, but she had like a skirt that was made of snakes, and she also had two like dragon or snake heads, like in addition to her human head, which was in the middle. So she had two other like dragon heads on the side. So that was, like I said, like an Aztec god that kind of represented nature in the sense that it was like beautiful but also cruel. You know what I mean? So like I said, a lot of the gods were kind of like represented that, like,
Well, it explained indifference
sure,
of how followers could die
yeah, like,
without any real tangible reason.
yeah,
Well, the gods are kind of indifferent.
yeah.
Bryce, we did. He says he wants to know more about the Jinn. We did a show on the Jinn.
We did actually. It was a
Yeah.
while back, but yeah, we
You
did
can
do a
find
show
it.
about that.
It's a pretty good show.
I don't remember a lot about it, but yeah,
Yeah.
we did a show about that. Also, there's a Mayan god called Chak that was a dragon, and he is a rain god.
Yeah.
And this is probably the closest, other than Quetzalcoatl, this is probably the closest Meso-American god that looks like a dragon, that looks like an East Asian dragon.
Yeah.
He had like the whiskers and the scales, and he was also a rain bringer,
Yeah.
like the Asian ones were.
Did we spell the Jin with a D? D-G-I-N?
Probably.
Yeah, it's probably...
D-J-I-N-N.
Yeah, it's
I think is the...
N-N. Yeah,
there's a lot of different spellings.
Yeah, Bryce, so that's the spelling we probably use. D-J-I-N-N, probably.
Yeah.
You'll find the show.
Yeah, but we did do a show about that a while back. Like I said, I don't remember what we talked about on it because it was a long time ago.
I remember you dug up a lot of stuff on it.
I did, yeah. But yeah, so the Mayans did actually have a rain god that looked very much like an Asian dragon. And he usually had like a lightning bolt in one of his hands or an axe or something like that, and was also associated with thunderstorms, like I said, very much like the Asian dragons. So to wrap up, why is it that all of these vastly different cultures from around the world all have myths about dragons, which are all pretty similar? There's a lot of possibilities for that. Could it be that they all came up with these stories independently? Was there more cultural exchange between the civilizations than we previously thought? Could they all be talking about a real animal or an exaggeration of a real animal or something like that? So here's some of the theories behind why these very specific dragon myths are so widespread. So you got Joseph Campbell, the very famous mythologist, and he's kind of going on the theories of Carl Jung, who is maybe coming to the thing, it's like, well, maybe dragons are one of those symbols that are in the collective unconscious, that it's like that symbolize a particular thing. People don't have to be taught that. Everybody just comes with that in their innate hardware type of thing. So he was kind of coming at it from that thing, and he's just like, well, every culture is just going to come up with that, with their own version of that, because it's hardwired.
Yeah, what's
into
funny
people.
Is that the dragon in the original descriptions in all these cultures is a serpent.
Uh-huh.
And humans, all primates, are basically born with an
Well, that's the next thing I was going to talk about.
Aversion to snake. So
I don't have that, but some people, a lot of people do.
Well, especially in the wild, though.
Yeah.
People that are, and even chimpanzees don't like them. So it could be, with humans, the aversion to snakes, they recognize it as a source of power. That snake must have some kind of power. If it's bigger, it's even more powerful. Kind of awesome and fearsome. So that's a good template to put one of your god ideas on, or a god myth, on something that that is powerful, and you kind of have a fear for it.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. So that's what I'm saying. It makes sense.
Yeah, that was the next thing.
That everybody has something like a dragon.
Right.
But we're talking about a snake that flies, a huge fucking snake. That flies and does shit like its heads grow back. Later on, you put wings on it because things that fly have wings, or you put feathers on it.
Breathes fire.
And you put feathers on it because it flies. In China, they said, fuck that. No, it just flies because it's fucking got so much chi in it. Just painted with clouds behind it. It doesn't even need wings. Just it levitates.
Yeah.
So that all makes sense.
Well, there was a book that came out, which a lot of people reference. It came out in 2000, and it was called An Instinct for Dragons, and it was by an anthropologist named David E. Jones. And he said pretty much what you said. He's like, well, humans, and they've done experiments with various other primates, monkeys, apes, stuff like that, and a lot of them have an innate fear of snakes. And so he's arguing that maybe the reason that all of these cultures have dragon mythology and that a lot of them look like snakes is because of that. Is because it's an evolutionary, it's something that's like, left over from our primate ancestors, because we had to look out for snakes all the time. And the fact that a lot of dragon mythology has also aspects of big cats and raptors, like birds, which were kind of our main predators when we were still
in the trees. And
in the
the predators of our ancestors we descended from.
Right. So he argues that it could be just because we have this primeval fear of animals that used to be our predators, that we're combining those in our mythology, which I guess some like makes some kind of sense. You know what I mean?
You're using the most badass thing you can think of.
Right. And he argues
that scare you.
He argues also that he's like a lot of dragon mythology, like the dragons usually live somewhere like in caves or like in the ocean or somewhere like that's scary.
Place where you're afraid to go.
Like that you're afraid to go.
That's why you don't see them all the time.
Right.
That's how they explain it. They're down underneath. They're in no fucking water. They're in those damn caves. You don't want to go in there.
Yeah.
Better watch out at the bottom of that lake.
Which, I mean, there could be something to that.
Yeah, it sounds
And
reasonable.
that is kind of going back to what Joseph Campbell was saying earlier. It's like maybe this is like dragons are like a symbol of like, well, you know, it maybe it's something like atavistic where, you know, this is something from our ancestors. Obviously, we don't have to worry about getting eaten by them anymore. Well, most of us at least. But because we still have that in our DNA, then we come up with all of these stories about these creatures that are like an amalgamation of like all of our predators, like in one big thing.
You said in the Greek stories, some of them spit venom.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
That's a poisonous snake, is what they're talking about.
Yeah.
They're talking about an asp or a viper.
Mm-hmm.
Of some sort.
Which, yeah, and like I said,
cobra.
back in the old days when we were still living in caves and shit like that, yeah, we did have to worry about getting attacked by snakes or big cats or whatever. So it could be that we're just making monsters out of a combination of those things.
That's probably what it is.
Which, yeah, maybe it is.
And maybe, like I said before, the Eastern dragons have 4 limbs. So not only snakes, maybe salamanders. Because the Japanese had the kappa, they were scared of it. It ate children or killed children.
Yeah.
So that might have got mixed in there too.
Yeah.
Where it's a serpent and it's got 4 arms and legs like a giant salamander.
Like a salamander. Yeah, so because like I said, every conception of the dragon, no matter what culture it comes from, is a combination of different animals.
Yeah.
It's not just a flying snake. It's always like, it's mainly a snake, but then its head looks like something else, like a lion or a horse or something. It looks like something else.
Chinese dragon's got a red mane around it. Well, a lot of fucking salamanders have that too. The ones that are aquatic, their lungs are basically gills that are on the outside of their head.
Yeah.
I think there's only a couple that still have that, but maybe a long time ago there were more of them in China. So it's got not only is this snake got 4 arms and legs like a salamander, it's got a mane like a salamander, the gills of the salamander.
Yeah.
But if it's got a mane, its head and its face is almost kind of like a lion.
Yeah.
So the guy that's drawn it has never seen the creature. He's only seen other drawings of it. So maybe heard a description in poetry. Like it's got a mane like a lion. It's got 4 arms and legs like a salamander, and it's just long and scaly with a forked tongue, and it spits fire, and it flies, and it's as fierce as a lion, and it's got a mane. And then you start drawing what you would know as a Chinese Oriental dragon, a Chinese dragon.
Yeah.
That's,
I could see how that would happen.
Yeah.
I could see that would happen.
Yeah.
Now, we brought this up earlier, but one of this is always brought up when you talk about dragons, is that it could be that maybe ancient peoples that didn't know anything about dinosaurs came across fossils and maybe made the myth out of the dragon out of that. And there was another book that also came out in 2000, which was called The First Fossil Hunters, written by Adrienne Mayer. And she says that maybe some of the dragon stories came about because of ancient people coming across, fossil beds and like not knowing what those animals were. And she does note that a lot of places where there's a lot of dragon lore are places where there were a lot of, large fossil beds found, like a lot of like large dinosaurs, you know what I mean? But then she's like, and not necessarily dinosaurs either. They're like, because there were fossils of like big mammals, like giant giraffes and shit like that, which probably if you saw that and didn't know what it was, might look like a dragon to you.
Yeah, if you just found the neck.
Right.
And maybe it's part of the back, and the other bones are gone.
Yeah.
You go, man, that's a big
Yeah,
ass
what
serpent.
the hell is that? Right. That's
Look
what
at
I
his
mean.
head.
Yeah.
The head might be on it. You go, man, that's a fucking big ass serpent.
Yeah,
a
because it's
dragon.
like obviously I don't see any animals that look like this nowadays, so you don't know what that is. She also notes too that in China, where there are a lot of fossil beds and there were like a lot of large, fossil animals found, like, she's like, well, a lot of times, ancient Chinese people, like even modern Chinese people, will dig those up and they call them dragon bones, and they're used in traditional Chinese medicine, right?
Yeah.
Now, she does point out that she's like, well, I don't think this accounts for all of the dragon stories, obviously, because she's like, some dragon stories, like the ones from the Norse mythology and stuff like that, they don't really have any fossil beds of any note up there. So they might be getting the stories from somewhere else. Although some people have said, like I said, maybe they're finding like huge whale skeletons, or maybe they're seeing big giant oarfish or something like that that's giving them ideas. But she's like, so this can't account for all of the stories.
They might
you know
be
what I mean?
stealing things that have images
Sure.
of big serpents on it. Because they raid it a lot.
Yeah,
And
it could have been that too.
Yeah.
They might have been getting stuff from other
Yeah.
cultures. And she also argues, she's like, well, and these also could be exaggerations of animals that they saw in real life, like Gila monsters or iguanas or crocodiles or something like that, and they were just like exaggerating stuff that they saw. You know what I mean? So it could have been that too. So it could have been a combination of those things.
I think part of it is also they're stealing each other's fucking equipment and jewelry and swords and shields, and some of the European stuff's going to have dragons on it.
Yeah.
And
people
they
are like,
see that and go, oh yeah, we know what that is.
Yeah.
As a dragon. And however they're being shown a dragon, they just replicate it. And it's probably, if we were to see it, it would probably look like a snake. They'd probably call it a dragon.
Right.
A snake with hands, or a snake with 2 feet, maybe a snake with wings. There it is.
Because there are some weird fucking like salamander type animals, or like snake type animals that were kind of like halfway in between snakes and salamanders that have little feet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's inspiring.
They're not big, but they're little, but
Yeah.
they still have little feet on them. And they might have been like bigger back then. Also, there have been some other arguments that maybe dragons were just kind of like a personification of natural phenomena, like lightning or rainbows or tornadoes or something like that. Maybe they were just kind of describing it in terms of a living creature, but it was, because it was like a natural phenomenon, they didn't really understand what was going on.
Well, if you believe in something that's kind of super powerful and it's in the sky, it can fly, has magical abilities, then that's a good way to describe thunder.
Yeah,
it
and
must be that thing.
It should be noted that a lot of dragon mythology is based around thunder or storms or rain or something like that.
And you see lightning. And you see, well, that might be coming out of the mouth of that thing.
He's breathing fire. Right.
Yeah. A Greek wouldn't say that. They would just say, "Oh, that's fucking,
That's
Zeus. That's Zeus throwing down his lightning bolts." Yeah.
Like he does.
Right. They had but to a person that doesn't have Zeus, lightning bolts and thunder, you can be like, yeah, that's dragons, man. They're up in the sky.
Yeah, they're like, I don't know what they're doing up there. They're just like fucking fighting, man. Going. Yeah. That's what. Yeah. If you don't have Zeus, the lightning god, you maybe think it's like some kind of like big ass animal up there.
Yeah.
Now this might be. I kind of think this is probably closer to what happened. There's a scholar from Harvard University named Michael Witzel, and he's actually knows Sanskrit. And he thinks what might have happened is that the stories of dragons are so old that they predate like a lot of the human diaspora.
Okay.
Meaning that
Tiamat was not the first dragon.
Right. Meaning that the stories are so old that like when all the humans were kind of in one spot, they all had these stories, and then later when they all moved out to split, and then they later became then they later diverged.
Yeah.
Like, when people that went to the east for whatever reason they're like, oh, all our dragons are like friendly and cool, and like we're this way we went like our dragons are like evil and terrible and eat maidens and whatnot. And they think that maybe that divergence happened because, at least in the modern parlance, and I think this has gone back like a long time, in the East they tend to be more, I guess, like in sync with nature, whereas in the West we're kind of more, we want to dominate nature. And they think that may be why our dragon myths are, we have to defeat the dragon, and they're just kind of like, man, nah, the dragons are cool. Yeah. You know what I mean? They just like live with the dragon, like they like the dragon.
I think a lot of it is an instinct. If you probably took a bunch of people, colonized an area with them, and these people have no lore about any dragon, no concept of a dragon, you keep them in isolation long enough, anywhere on the planet, they'd probably end up seeing a snake. And from that, 1,000 years later, without any contact around anybody else, they'd probably have a dragon.
Probably they would.
Just based upon a fear of snakes.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that's just something that a lot of humans maybe innately have.
Something you automatically just make up.
And then that's something that most people will just make up.
Then each culture would have their own story around it. So they'd be a little bit different.
But I will note that what I was saying before, it's like I kind of hew to the theory that I think the dragon stories are so old that they happened prior to people like spreading out. Yeah. You know what I mean? So when they spread out, then they diverged. I don't think they diverged first. You know what I mean? So I think that's probably what happened. And why I think that is because even among the Asian stories, because like I said, the Asian stories are generally like dragons are super cool and they're, signs of wisdom and, they're awesome and everything like that. But even in the Asian stories, there are some that are just like the European stories. Like there's a Japanese story, for example, which is about this guy. He's actually a storm god named Susanoo, and he fights a 8-headed, 8-tailed dragon named Yamada no Orochi. Exactly like the Western stories of a storm god fighting a dragon. That's like very, very similar. And it's very, very old. So I kind of feel like what happened was that, like I said, when all the humans were kind of all in a similar spot, they all came up, they all had these stories, and then once they spread out later, then they diverged.
What you're describing is the Graham Hancock. Graham Hancock?
Yeah.
That's basically his thesis. That humans were all kind of at one time in a centralized civilization that may have been pretty big. They all traded and talked with each other and had similar stories. But some kind of catastrophe happened. Maybe what they're talking about with Atlantis. Some kind of flood happened. And then people spread out because that original mother civilization died. They took ideas with them.
Yeah, and then like when they moved farther away, like the stories diverged.
Which would mean that if that's where the dragon came from, if that's where dragon stories came from, that's also where pyramids came from. Because they descended from a place where...
That would make a lot of sense.
Most places have things like pyramids. That's a possibility. But I think it's probably 50-50, because it's also possible that things like pyramids are a natural consequence of being a human being.
Sure.
It's square.
I'm kind of half and half on it. I'm not really sure.
Really, all the pyramid is it's square, and then you take a square and you try to make it as big as you can.
Yeah,
and
you don't.
It's going to get smaller as you go up,
right.
Building it by hand.
You don't necessarily have to have gotten the idea from somebody else to do that.
Yeah.
Like you might just come up with that.
There's a lot of differences between an Aztec pyramid and a Greek, and an Egyptian pyramid. A lot of differences. I think what it is most people make something called ziggurats, which is a building. It's a rectangular building. You make it as big as you can, and you stand on top of it. You look cool.
Like you do.
And then you
look
put
cool.
Decorations.
Ta-da!
And then somebody goes, you know what? Fuck that. I'm gonna build another one on top of that one. And then the other guy says, you know what? I'm gonna fuck that motherfucker up by putting another one on top
of that one.
And every time you do it, it gets smaller.
Right.
All right, and eventually somebody says, you know what? Fuck all that. I'm gonna build one that doesn't have any steps to it. It's gonna be a smooth fucking transition. It's just gonna be whoom like that. All right, and they're gonna look at that and go, "How the fuck did you make that? You can't even stand
It's like
on it.
thousands
What's
of
it
years
for?
from now,
You
this is
can't
gonna
even
blow their
fucking
minds."
Yeah, so this is you can't even stand on this shit. And that's what the Egyptians did. And you can see the older Egyptian pyramids. They kind of start off as a ziggurat.
They're kind of janky looking.
Yeah, they look fucked up.
They're kind of janky looking.
And they got that from fucking Babylon.
Yeah.
They had those in Babylon, which is now where Iraq is.
See, that's
And
what kind of like, you know how the whole thing where it's like, oh, aliens built pyramids and all that kind of bullshit, which I don't believe that.
No.
But the thing about, yeah, you can look in Egypt.
Yeah.
They have other earlier pyramids
that look fucked up.
that look kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
Like that was their first draft.
Yeah.
You know, where they're like, well, that didn't really work out. We can probably do better than that.
I'm pretty sure I know how they built it.
Yeah.
It was just blocks they made one, and then left a slot so you could drag the blocks onto the next one. And then as they started building it, they left an empty space that would be a fucking tunnel.
Yeah.
And they had a train track in it. And then
I've seen like an animation of how they would do it, and it makes total sense.
And then once they got the top stone in there, they said, "Fuck it, let's fill up this elevator, this fucking train shaft." Basically, it had a subway in it.
Yeah.
Basically, a train tunnel.
Yeah.
But it was manually operated. They used levers, just like fucking what's his name said.
Like I said, they weren't dumb.
And they used levers to fucking move those fucking bricks that were on wooden slabs up that train track. By using levers, a bunch of guys working, and they were all built to order, and they were all built to go into each place in order because they practiced it out of little fucking.
Yeah, they probably made little models.
They made a model of it. Yeah, they made all the little fun. They practiced it, putting it together, little cubes. They had numbers on them, and they would say, "Okay, well, how do we get it there?" And they're playing with it like it's Legos.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna leave it hollow in here. How does it keep going? And then they fucking say, "Okay, how many of these?" Now, once it's done, they say, okay, take it apart in reverse and put a number on each one of those, and we'll send it to the quarry to have it made in the order that we need it.
Right.
To different dimensions. So that means that you're talking about a construction company.
Yeah.
It's exactly what you're talking about.
Well, they would have had that.
Yeah, and then they filled it up on the inside. And it left it. There's some stuff in the inside that they were doing as they were making it, like chambers and shit. And slabs for walls, but they had it all planned out.
Yeah, you'd have to.
They practiced it over and over again, put it together. It's like a model.
Yeah.
Yeah. They did this shit in a fucking building, and there's probably 9 or 10 fucking geniuses in there, making those little bricks and practicing putting it together.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
So, do you think that the dragon stories? Do you think that they all came from one common source, like maybe thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago before humans really spread out to any great degree? Or do you think that it's something inherent in humans that they're just going to come up with no matter what culture they grow up in?
I think it's inherent.
You think?
They came up with it because
I'm not sure.
Because they saw snakes. Some people borrowed it.
Yeah.
They traded. They were trading with them, and they got that idea. Somebody gave them something. This is a dragon. Oh, I've never seen one of those. I'm gonna put that on my sword.
Yeah, that's cool.
Then that's pretty neat. Those are real. Yeah, they're real.
Yeah, I saw one.
I never saw one. That's probably what they're doing.
Saw one flying around.
And then everybody's got their own version of the dragon, and they're blended it in with creatures that they know from their environment. It's the same. I think it's the same thing as a pyramid.
Yeah.
Same thing. You're gonna end up with things like pyramids, because it's just a square building. And then you just take it to the next level. A square building on top of a square building.
And like you said, a lot of cultures have pyramids, but they're all like a little bit different.
They're all made a different way.
And dragons are kind of the same. They're all very similar, but they all have their own kind of cultural spin on it.
You take an Aztec pyramid and start pulling it apart, there's another pyramid underneath it. And then pull that one apart, there's another pyramid underneath that one. It's like a shell after shell after shell, because every time they build one, when a new king would take over, he'd have it faced and rebuilt to be his temple.
Yeah.
You know, so they improved them as they went. Some of those things that were there for centuries. So it's not blocks; it's stones. I think they're stones, and there's parts of the facing has sand in it too, stone and sand. They weren't as big, but they were built by hand. You know, people carrying rocks and sand, and then they faced them. They put a face. You know, they put stone on the outside of it, carve it, put stories, writing, glyphs, all there, all of them. And then they changed the staircase. It got steeper and steeper every time they put a new one on there. But anytime they fucking busted into a Mexican pyramid, there was another pyramid underneath it.
Yeah.
So it was done over time.
Erica said, I think it's inherent like Bigfoot, haha.
I think it is.
Well, and
You
like
got a
I said...
man, and he's a wild man, and he's big.
Yeah,
and
we
he's
mentioned that
fucking hairy.
before, that like Bigfoot is kind of another myth that is very, very widespread around the globe, and everybody kind of has their own like take on it.
Yeah.
And it may be that was, like I said, I kind of feel like it's easier to say with like Bigfoot or Sasquatch type or Yeti type creatures because they all seem pretty similar. Like I said, it's just like a big hairy dude.
Yeah.
Which doesn't seem that weird. Dragon seems a little bit more specific, so maybe it needs a little bit more explanation. But it might be the same thing. It might be the same manifestation, maybe.
It wasn't until the early 1900s that European or Western zoologists, who were the leaders in the world at that time, wasn't until the early 1900s that they actually believed in the gorilla. They were hearing stories of a gorilla, but they're going, "Oh yeah, he's a big, hairy man. We've heard that story before."
Yeah, we know that one.
Sasquatch, you've heard it. They didn't believe it until they saw it. Then they captured him, took him to zoos and shit. They go, "Yeah, the big, hairy, wild man is real. This is it." They call it it's a gorilla.
Yeah. Danny says, "What if Bigfoot was prehistoric humans unevolved?" I've kind of thought of that before.
There are no Bigfoot. I really wanted there to be a Bigfoot. But no, it's not possible. You have satellites now. They can fucking pick up heat sources.
But it could be a racial memory of when humans lived alongside other proto-humans.
That were bigger than us.
That were bigger and furrier.
Yeah.
It could be that. So it could just be like repeated stories over the years,
Yeah.
maybe.
Or it could be just a natural thing. You're out in the woods by yourself and you're afraid of a bigger guy. Running into a bigger guy.
A bigger furrier.
Yeah, and he's stronger than you and he's fucking crazy. He's wild. He's got all his hair on him. So, you know, and he'll eat you.
Like the skunk ape.
Yeah,
like Tom
skunk
will do
ape. Like
if you catch him on the right day.
That's right. So that's what they're talking about. Because every culture kind of has things like that.
Yeah.
The Yeti and shit.
That's what I'm saying. So it's kind of similar.
The problem with a North American Bigfoot is that for something like that to exist, there'd have to be a breeding population of them. Which means there'd be a lot of them. You'd see a lot of signs, and they'd walk. Somebody hit one with a car.
Yeah, they'd get run over. You'd see their poop or something.
One would die. And fucking
you'd find dead ones.
Yeah, you're fishing in a lake, and fucking a dead one comes fucking floating down across the lake, you know, and he, you know, and not the lake, excuse me, the river, and he died 100 miles away, and his body, you know, way up in the mountains. So no, there's no Bigfoot, and we have the satellite technology that can see deer and caribou and rabbits and shit from space. You see the body heat. And I imagine that some of those satellites are AI, just looking for certain shit. And it probably has some AI fucking protocols in there that if anything's unusual seen, to fucking look at it and record it. So you probably pick up a Bigfoot. Go, what the fuck is this dude doing out in fucking Canada, out in the middle of nowhere? Nothing like that's been seen, but you could probably find it with using satellites today.
I still want you to like put on a Sasquatch suit and go like run around outside, like in the Everglades or something, so somebody would think that it was.
There are some compelling Sasquatch stories. There are some U.S. park rangers that believe that exist.
Of all the cryptids, I'd be the most receptive to a Sasquatch type creature. I still don't think they exist, but I would be the least surprised if they found one. How about that?
Yeah. Loch Ness Monster does not exist.
No. I don't believe in that at all.
There's not enough food in there. And there's
like I said, but if they found a Sasquatch, I'd be like, oh, okay, fair enough.
There's not enough food in that lake. It's too cold.
And I'd be really surprised if they found a Loch Ness Monster.
And there wouldn't be one. There'd be an entire breeding population of them.
Although I do find it interesting that a lot of lakes have similar stories about them.
They're afraid of the deep, cold deep.
Yeah.
You know, maybe these are people that making these stories up that have never been to the ocean from a long time ago. The deepest thing they know of is that fucking lake. There's got to be something down at the bottom of that lake. Dudes are dying. They're missing. I don't know what happened to that guy. One dude got swallowed by something. It couldn't have been a catfish, but that might have been what it was.
But it probably was a catfish.
Yeah.
I've seen some.
The Loch Ness.
I've seen some terrifyingly big catfish.
Yeah.
So they could
Yeah.
easily swallow a person. So I'm just saying.
I tend to think that now that Jenny's laid it out and I thought about it, it's something that humans are just going to come up with.
Yeah, it might be. It just might be something that's inherent in our DNA, in our brain chemistry.
You're taking the fear of snakes and you're magnifying it.
Yeah. And it's going to manifest differently, like, no matter what culture you grew up in, but it's going to be kind of similar across the board.
And in tribal societies, people that are in touch with the earth, anything that you're afraid of is powerful. Because you fear power, but you respect it, too.
Yeah.
So you see a snake and you're scared of it. God, there got to be a reason. It's powerful. Imagine one 100 times that size. That's what they're thinking.
Yeah.
And they're going, yeah, and it flies. Yeah. So then that's how it begins.
Yeah.
Big ass snake flying.
Big ass flying snake.
Yeah, where it comes out of the water, comes out of the ocean,
Pretty
comes out of
much.
a lake,
Oh my god.
comes from a place where you can't go, cave,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Like scary places.
Yeah. Snake comes out of a cave. It's huge. Draco. You know.
Yeah.
That's what they're talking about.
Danny
So
says
everybody's gonna have that.
Danny says, great show and topic tonight. Well done on the presentation, Jenny and Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad we got through all the information
Yeah.
because I was just like, I was worried because I saw that I was like, oh my god, are we going to be able to get through all this? And we did, and we are like almost at 4 hours, but
Erica says the same thing. She thinks it's inherent like a Bigfoot.
yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah,
that.
and pyramids.
Yeah.
You're gonna come up with shit like that.
Yeah, everybody's going to come up with their own spin on the same kind
Yeah.
of thing. Because like I said, humans are inherently like very
Yeah.
similar. You know, we're all the same species. We're not really that different. Tammy says, ever seen the movie The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then Bigfoot, starring Sam Elliott? I haven't yet, but it's on my list. I definitely want to see that. Because how can you not want to see a movie called that has Sam Elliott in it? I ask you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But yeah, eventually, maybe we should review that this week.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll watch it this
Remember,
weekend.
yeah.
If we'll watch it this weekend, maybe, if I remember. Maybe I should write that down, because otherwise I'll forget. Man Who Killed Hitler. I'll remember. I think it might be on, I just saw it on one of the streaming services the other day. So we might be able to watch it. All right, so we're at 4 hours. And it's 11:20,
Yeah,
so I
I'm
guess we
sleepy
better
as hell.
like wrap it up because
Yeah.
I'm getting kind of sleepy.
I gotta take a shower.
But I'm glad that you guys enjoyed the show. I enjoyed the show. I had a really good time like researching all of this because it seemed. Oh my god, what are you doing? You unplugged me.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
No, this is my plug.
Why did it say what it came up on here though?
Oh yeah, I unplugged the wrong one for a second, but I put it back in.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I'm not crazy.
No.
All right. I thought you said I was making it up. I was like, no, it came up on here.
No, I put it back in.
All right. All right. So, thank you guys for hanging out with us this evening, talking about dragons. This was a really fun show to do. Thank you for all of your super chats. And we will see you guys again. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do a movie review tomorrow. I have a movie in mind, but I haven't watched it yet, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to like stream about it tomorrow. But if not, then we are going to do our regular show on Friday night, our sidetrack show as we usually do. So hopefully you guys can join us for that. But you know, hopefully you guys have a good rest of your night. Have a good day tomorrow, and we'll see you guys again on Friday night. Good night.